We laugh, but I mean, what a spectacular, catastrophe for the government again. And by the way, it's difficult to have any sympathy for Angela Rayner because this is a woman who has personally hounded out of office many of her political opponents for situations not as bad as this one. And the idea that she's she's often paraded as this working class hero, and yet she's got trusts and she's got multiple homes, and by her own admission, she has failed to pay a lot of tax. So it's just yet another catastrophe for this woeful Starmer government that I think is on borrowed time, quite literally.
Champagne socialism at its very best. Zia, I'll see you later on. Zia Yusuf, head of Doge up there, Reform Conference in Birmingham. If you're going, you'll see me there later on today, and also I'm on a panel show tomorrow on Saturday. So that's what I'm doing for the weekend. Alex Phillips is coming next. Have a great weekend. I'll see you Monday.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and good morning to you. It feels like a positive morning, doesn't it? I'm looking outside, the sun is shining. My commute to work this morning was fairly easy. There didn't seem to be anyone on the road. What is going on? Why is life suddenly seeming uncomplicated? Or is it? Maybe I'm just reveling in the glory that Angela Rayner's political career is basically a dumpster fire that I have a feeling is about to be put out. If rumours are true, I don't think she's going to survive this one. And there was I yesterday saying, I bet she will. You know what this lot are like, audacious people, hypocrites, a lot of them. They'll dig their heels in, they'll expect it all to blow over. It ain't gonna, is it? This is just going from bad to worse. So I think we better watch the clock on that one. And you know what, Ange? Mind that door on your way out, love. But there you go. That is still our top story of today. And we're going to be rattling through the other news stories kicking about today and the things that have shaped the news agenda of the week. But also, of course, Reform UK's big conference kicks off in Birmingham today. Nigel Farage due to speak around 3 o'clock, I believe. The big news from Reform was the fact that Nadine Dorries has defected over there. Will there be more announcements coming up? Who knows? But we've certainly got a lot to talk about with regard to their march in the polls as well. 1 in 3 voters now saying they're going to back reform, over 30% of predicted vote share, compared to the Labour Party languishing on 19% and the Conservatives down on 17%. We've gone, haven't we, from having basically a two-party state under the first-past-the-post system to basically almost having a one-party state. Will it last? Well, the psephologist and elections guru John Curtis is now sending out the clarion call to news stations saying, well, it looks like Nigel Farage is going to be the next Prime Minister. And when he speaketh, we do listeneth. Nigel Farage is also someone who seems to be extremely good at reading the political tea leaves. Certainly in my experience, he often predicts things and they come to pass way before anybody else spots them. And he seems to think there could be a general election as early as 2027. So there you go, folks. We've got to hold on for another year and a half, maybe 2 years, but hopefully there are brighter days ahead. So let's all enjoy as we go into the weekend a little bit of optimism and cheer. I know it's a bit of a gear change from how I was a few days ago, moaning about the dystopian nature of the world, but it's always good to balance light and shade, isn't it? Listen, if you want to get in touch with your thoughts and feelings today for a bit of communal catharsis or perhaps some kumbaya, or maybe even a yee-haw-hoo-ha, it's 0344 499 1000 that you're looking for. That is the number charged at your normal network rate by which you can speak to me directly in the studio and share the love. You can also use that number as well to send me a WhatsApp message or indeed leave me a little voice note on WhatsApp. I really do enjoy playing those out. Like I always say, it's a bit like Russian roulette. You know, I say hit it up, it gets played and I don't know what to expect, so keep them clean because I want to keep my job. 87222 is the number if you'd like to send me a text message. If you're going to be old school about it, you have to write the word talk before you type your text. That way it knows to find its way into this particular subsection of floor 17 and doesn't gamble around studios where it's probably not going to be as welcome. OK, talking about people who are very welcome, let's give a big shout-out and a warm welcome to my favourite Baba-in-Chief, the wonderful, inimitable, erudite and effervescent Mr James Price, former Conservative government advisor. Good morning, Baba.
All right, my love.
All
I've
right,
loved
love.
around floor 17 far too many times.
Oh, it's an interesting floor. I always try to describe it as... I had a wonderful Uber driver this morning. Shout out to you if you are listening, Nicholas. And he was saying, oh, you know, do you get to see Alan Brazil? And I'm like, unfortunately, I actually don't know who he is, but I'm sure I walk past him most days of the week. And then you go down the far end to the Virgin Studios and it's all slebby down there. You've got comedians and actors and sports stars and we're just stuck in the middle, I don't know, eyes in the newspapers being really nerdy.
I don't know why TalkSport don't ask me on for my opinion on civil service reform more.
I know, they're missing a trick, aren't they? But talking about who's on the bench and who's off the bench, hey, see what I did there? Angela Rayner, is she going to survive?
Well, in a biological sense, yes, but I think that may be the only sense in which she does. I think she's completely toast now, and it couldn't happen to a nicer woman. This is someone who has managed to be holier than thou with a huge number of her political opponents, both outside the Labour Party and within the Labour Party. Just before the holiday in which we saw her vaping on the little boat and necking Whispering Angel on the beach and all the rest of it, we learned that in a piece of legislation that her department has been pushing through, that it says somewhere in there that if you're a metro mayor, someone like Andy Burnham, maybe in Manchester, who has aspirations to be Labour leader one day, someone like Sadiq Khan, boo hiss, who also has aspirations to be Labour leader, will not be allowed to be an MP at the same time that they're a metro mayor. I wonder why Angela Rayner slipped that bit in, so she could kill off 2 of her opponents. And now all this is coming back to bite her because she's been caught out in the most astonishing hypocritical fashion, and there's not many people left to defend her.
I think at the crux of all of this, I think at the foundations of why she thought she could dodge stamp duty and get away with it is just sheer arrogance. I think that woman is incredibly arrogant, much like Jess Phillips. There's something about these leftist women and their cockiness.
That's a really good point, actually. And I think you see this across the whole of the Labour Party. Maybe not so much now because reality has come and slapped them so hard in the face they don't know which way is up. But when they first got into office, crowing about how the country was desperate for them and all the rest of it, and everything's going to be fine now because we are socialists and therefore we are the good people. And I think they genuinely did believe this nonsense, and they thought that their poo didn't smell anymore. And I'm afraid to tell you that it does. And this is a problem. They've had a year now. Things have just got much, much worse, which maybe suggests that the Conservatives, my lot, for all the mistakes and the missed opportunities in some areas, were holding back the most monumental tide of awfulness, and Labour have just let that flow over the country. And they go, oh, it's actually a bit more complicated than all that, and that just being a kind of gobby backbench MP does not qualify you to run the country. You know, it's painful when reality comes to hit you as it has. Maybe you're not quite the wonderful person that you and your hardcore socialist mates have been telling yourselves that you are for so long.
Do you know, one thing I think actually feeds the arrogance, particularly of the women of the Labour Party, is the fact that people on the other broadcast channels, especially at Sky, just don't actually even care to try and hold them accountable. I mean, looking at that interview that Rayner did with Beth Rigby, I'm surprised it didn't move into some sort of 1980s scene of rolling around on a sheepskin rug in front of an open fire together.
Gosh, there is an image. Which, of course, we know that Beth Rigby broke COVID rules, so maybe we'll set that scene during a COVID lockdown that they messed up. Yeah, you're completely right. It is really, really weird, and it's quite an eye-opening experience when you do realise bits of the mainstream media that act and operate in this way. You know, in a minute, I think we'll talk about Epping, for example, and I did try and go on the BBC website and see any real coverage of what's been happening with the Epping crime case. Not there. And I used to think that people that whinged about this sort of stuff were slightly fringe nutters and all the rest of it. But actually, I think that time and reality again has shown me this isn't the case. That Beth Rigby interview was nauseating.
Oh, it's great.
And she's tweeted stuff. Oh, I've only ever been really hard with her, but and all this stuff. We know this is nonsense. And Alex, you and I know this stuff because I've been around in Westminster before. You know how the game is played, and politicians have their favourite journalists, and friends of, sources close to.
Yeah.
We all know how the sausage is made, unfortunately, but it's really nauseating to see these people.
I mean, I worked at the
journalists
BBC in a previous life, and it was so utterly, abhorrently, objectively left-wing, to a radical level, that I had to leave. It sort of ended up throwing me into the arms of UKIP. I was so appalled at what I found when I was in their little talent pool scheme. I was supposed to be the next big, whatever of the future they were going to groom, and I was like, you ain't turning me into a socialist, I'm off. And I remember when I left to go work for UKIP, everyone at the BBC's jaws just hit the ground, and I was like, well, there you go, son. Not all of us are leftists like you.
Not the worst kind of grooming that could happen to somebody at the BBC either, by the way.
Oh, you're on fire this morning, James. Let's talk about Nadine Dorries, shall we? Are you surprised by her defection?
The bit that I am surprised by, I suppose there are two elements of this. One is the fact that Nadine Dorries, as people will remember, has been for a long time the biggest cheerleader of Boris Johnson.
Right.
And so if Nadine Dorries is doing this, I think this means that Boris has probably come to the realisation that there is no comeback for him anytime soon.
That's exactly what I said this morning. I said there is no way that Nadine made this decision without phoning Boris and said, what do you think I should do? And so either Boris has decided, hasn't he, that he doesn't want to come back into politics, or, because I have a feeling he might do at some stage, he's decided the vehicle might not be the Conservatives.
It's a very, very interesting theory. But I wonder, with all of the attacks that Reform have successfully landed on the Conservatives in recent years, most of it, I dare say, and most of the problem has been the eponymous Boris wave, as some people talk about it. The fact that after Brexit, we all sort of thought we'd get lower immigration, and talking about the Australian-style point scheme that Priti Patel put forward in the Home Office actually led to the most disgraceful explosion of legal immigration as well as illegal immigration, not to mention the lack of ability in dealing with the illegal immigration. And so that being levelled at the feet of Boris, and the sort of rumours that people like Dominic Cummings have said, which is that Boris, after he won the election, election, said, look, I want people like the Financial Times and the kind of North London lovies to like me again, so I'm going to open the floodgates in immigration because that's what all the lovies want. So interesting if you think that there might be a home for Boris even in the Reform Party. And the other thing, of course, is that a little while ago, we were all getting very angry about the Online Safety Act and the kind of censorship that that's caused on the internet. Well, who was the chief architect of that? It was Nadine Dorries.
Exactly. You know what? I was thinking that myself. This is what happens when you come from the greatest city on earth. You're just constantly linked in, aren't you? And I was thinking that as well, because there's been a lot of bashing of the online safety bill, rightfully so, especially the more pernicious elements that seem to be controlling free speech. And you're right. The person who brought that into play and was the main author of it was Nadine Dorries. Now, I'm not sure necessarily we can put at her doorstep some of this more stringent policing of tweets and the fact that 5 armed police turned up at Heathrow Airport to lift Graham Linehan because of something he posted on X back in April. I think her main concern was things like protecting children from adult content and dangerous content, which is a very noble and very necessary pursuit. But, you know, she has been in the Conservative Party holding various cabinet positions, which means she brings a wealth of experience, which is fantastic. I rather happen to be a fan of Nadine, as it happens. But that also means she brings political baggage.
Yeah, look, all most people want to do is nice things. I don't think even some of the communists and the socialists do, but even some sort of squishy lefties think that what they're doing is going to have a positive impact. I'm not quite sure how people like Ed Miliband can think that, but I think some of them do. Of course, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and it is the law of unintended consequences is the most powerful law in the universe. And I sat when I was in government in some meetings about the online safety bill. Before that, when I worked for some of the tech companies and saw it from their point of view, it's fiendishly complicated. And I think that the problem is that some people would just say, no, you just don't care enough about looking after children. We're going to push forward with this. And you ended up with Ofcom, who were the sort of regulator, who were given powers and responsibilities they themselves didn't actually want and weren't told how to do it by the politicians, which is why you end up with the porn age verification stuff and all of these things, because the regulator was told to do stuff. And okay, well, we'll just go and do what we've been told. And that's why, for all the talk about, oh, it's all just common sense, we do need to make sure, as you said, people with political experience get into either the Reform Party or a Reformed Conservative Party or whatever comes next. Otherwise, I think the blob will just continue to run rings around politicians, which is what's been happening for 30, 40 years.
I got to ask you about the blob, because I did a bit of a deep dive a couple of days ago, which is on the march on YouTube. People seem to be quite interested in this, about the Fabian Society. So I'm asking everyone who comes on what they know, what they've learned, because when I looked into this sort of rather radical socialist entity that someone told me, here's a little factoid, when George Orwell wrote 1984, he chose that date because it is a century after the establishment of the Fabian Society. And when you look at their members, it's everybody from the Governor of the Bank of England, head of the Met Police, most of the Labour cabinet, every single Labour Prime Minister, all the people who, when you then sort of do a transposition of the legislation that's being put into place, that's probably the most onerous, destructive and anti the nation's interests, it's all brought about by the same characters. And I'm beginning to think there's definitely something to see here.
That's an interesting idea. What I can tell you to start with is that it was named, just to get very nerdy for a second, after the Roman general who eventually defeated Hannibal, because Hannibal was so good in battles that he would roll around the country and defeating all these Roman armies. And so there was this Roman general, somebody Fabius, whose idea was to delay and to deny him battle and to try and starve him out. And the idea was that the Fabians took inspiration from this, that their kind of revolution would be slow and steady rather than revolutionary. So there's a history lesson that nobody asked for there. But I think where you're bang on is that the left is very, very good at both institution building, ironically, given they want to tear most things down, and institutional capture. Now, there's a guy called Antonio Gramsci, who was some mad Marxist Italian, thrown in prison, quite rightly, in the 20s. And in his diaries, he talked about the need for, quote, a long march through the institutions. And this is what the left has done so successfully, I'd say, since the end of the Second World War. Rather than the kind of mad revolution that Lenin did in Russia or any of the rest of it, don't need to do that, comrades. Let's go take over the BBC. Let's go take over lots of parts of the Church of England. Not all the good kind of country Tory vicars, but the higher echelons, the people who've got all the mad purse strings and everything. Let's go and take over all these other institutions. Let's go and take over bits of the civil service and the regulators. And in creeping their way through that, they don't have to win elections because they know their ideas are unpopular and mad. They've managed to assume huge amounts of control. And I think there's a lot of training that must come from the Fabians and other groups like that, people who are interested not in standing up and trying to make forthright arguments to an electorate and to win election, but just sneaking around the back door so they don't have to face any public scrutiny.
Do you know, if I was Empress on high, I would drain the swamp of the lot of them. It's always great catching up with you, James, and I love your little factoids and valuable history lessons. You're a great, well-read man indeed. The wonderful James Price, ladies and gentlemen. Now, if you would like to let me know your thoughts and feelings on all of this, why is Angela Rayner's house so much more expensive than her neighbours? That's right, apparently. When you look at land registry records, somehow her house seemed to swell by about £100,000 in value compared to the one next door. It's just fishy all the way, isn't it? Should she go? Is she going to go? I think we all know the answer to that. Well, what about Nadine Dorries' defection to reform? Might there be more? Do you welcome more? Or do you think that perhaps they should keep their powder dry and shouldn't be basically allowing former Conservatives to jump across? Or do you say experience is exactly what we need and are doing a big round of applause to see such a high-profile name decide to make that switch? Let me know. 03444 99 1000 is the number to dial, and we'll be speaking to some of you after this break. Should she go?
No, absolutely not. I think she should wait. We should all wait for the independent watchdog to come to its conclusions, and I'm very much hopeful that they're going to find in her favour.
Why should we wait for the independent watchdog where, in this case, when Angela Rayner has called for people to resign long before we've had a report from an independent watchdog for Tories caught up in similar scandals?
Very good morning to you, by the way. Morning, Glory, with me, Mike Graham.
Just some breaking news for you coming out of Liverpool Crown Court.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the programme. Welcome to the Home of Common Sense.
Loads to talk about, I promise you that. Loads and loads and loads.
Yes, it's me again, your genial host, Kevin O'Sullivan.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, hello, welcome back to the show. Shall we do some voice notes? Let's listen to Leon.
Morning, Alex. It's Councillor Leon Gibbs.
Councillor Marie Eglin,
Burton Latimer and Barton Seagrave.
Northamptonshire Council.
We are on our way to the Reform UK conference.
Keep an eye out for us.
I love that. That's some sort of like traffic update from people migrating over to Birmingham. I liked the sort of rhythm of that. It was almost sort of like a little limerick or something in the end. Drive safely, Leon, and stay tuned to Talk, and I will see you in Birmingham, no doubt. Come and say hello. Let's have a listen now to Kieran.
Alex, what a particularly fantastic day it is today. Sun's out and Angela Rayner is finished because there's no way back from this. Even if she stays, even if that jellyfish Keith Starmer doesn't give her the old Spanish archer, even if she stays in position, it's the beginning of the end of this government. You can't imagine it's only been 15 months and they've not just destroyed the country, but they've destroyed their own party. That is something to celebrate. The end of the Labour Party.
There you go, see? Sun's out, guns out, people. I think there's many reasons to be cheerful today, especially via the prism of a little bit of schadenfreude. Let's do some messages before we take some calls. I want Angela Rayner to hold a by-election. As an independent, she would struggle to even get 10% vote share. She seems to think voters wanted her when they just wanted Labour for some reason, says David from Romford. Do you know, David, I don't think voters did want Labour. Remember, of course, that in the most recent general election, the Labour vote share actually fell from the time that Magic Grandpa went up against Theresa May. They lost votes. What happened is everyone just didn't want to vote Conservative. So this idea that their landslide was because people were clamouring for the Labour Party just doesn't bear out. And I agree with you. I am sick to death, actually. We've got this parliamentary recall system, which is supposed to make politicians accountable to their constituents and enable constituents to say, we want a by-election, we want a change. But all the rules around this, and I don't think it should be a case that every 5 seconds people in a constituency just go, yeah, don't like him anymore, because we would be having by-elections all the time. But on a situation like this, I think that they should get a say, not just whether she broke the ministerial code with her tax dodging, which is bad enough, but I think the fact that she's now living the other side of the country to her blimmin' constituents who she's supposed to represent is reason enough for them to say, if you don't even want to live here, if you're gonna move 100 miles away, then go completely. And I think there should be a by-election. And do you know what? I have a feeling that Leon's lot might just take her seat, but I wouldn't expect it to happen anytime soon, because they're not exactly going to allow themselves to be the turkeys that voted for Christmas, are they? Rayner is the epitome of the phrase, fake it till you make it, says Tricia from Lancashire. I can think of a far worse phrase than that, Tricia, that Ofcom probably wouldn't allow me to say at this time of day, or any time, in fact. Bob in Chiswick says, Alex, there's not a chance of a 2027 election. Starmer knows he's got no chance of winning, so he's going to allow a Nero order where all are going to fall and burn, and there's going to be nothing left to save. It reminds me of Dad's Army. Don't panic, or is it? We're doomed. I don't know. I'll tell you what, as someone who was Mr Farage's right-hand woman for quite a number of years and has seen the workings of that gargantuan political brain, he's almost like Mystic Meg. It's really weird. He just predicts things miles away, miles out, that no one else sees coming. And I've seen him do this on countless occasions. I remember him saying to me about, I don't know, 5-7 years ago, just you wait, in 2024 there's going to be a massive Labour majority. And I'm like, no, there's not. He was right. And I'm like, how did you know that then? And so he was the one who said there's going to be an election in 2027. And like, I don't know how he does it, but he doesn't often get it wrong. So let's see. I'm up for it. Are you up for it? You're up for it. I knew it. Angela Rayner won't be gone until after Nigel's speech, mainly so he can't take the mick. If you think Nigel's not going to mention Angela Rayner in his speech because she hasn't yet resigned or whatnot, I think you're probably a bit mad. I dare say he's going to go full guns blazing on that one. Let's speak now to Tarquin, who's in London. Hello there, Tarquin.
Alex, how are you doing? Fantastic show as usual. I'm just delighted to hear you in a good mood this morning compared to how you have been these last couple of days.
Oh, I tell you what, it felt a bit... Maybe it's the time of day. Maybe I wake up happy and then during the course of being bombarded by the news agenda, I end up a manic depressive come the evening.
Alex, what it is, you're such an acerbic bellwether of what's actually happening that you just reflect what we're all feeling. So no, it's absolutely spot on the way you feel. So when you're feeling good, I think it is a good sign, quite honestly. Now, sadly, I'm going to pop that bubble in that.
Oh no, Tarquin, why?
Well, the news of Nadine Dorries, to me, is just like that. Is just like a foreboding of bad. That woman is surreptitiously infiltrated. She is like a Mata Hari of the Tory party. She's going to slither in. She's been under orders from Boris et al. To slither in there, find out the lay of the land, find out what the weak points are. I wouldn't trust her as far as you could proverbial, because she's just not trustworthy. And when you mentioned, which I wasn't aware of, the online set, she's just bad all over. This woman needs to be kept in the foyer selling T-shirts for reform, and that's it.
Wow, Tarquin, that is some pretty strong opinions there, my darling, but very interesting, actually, because a lot of people have been sort of clapping and celebrating. It was, of course, Nadine Dorries who wrote that rather spectacular books about all the dastardly factions and the, plots in the corridors of power within the Conservative Party. She definitely had ostracised herself from their particular political machine. But interesting, this idea that if people come from the Tories into reform, can they be trusted, or are they actually agents for their former party? On that note, we're actually going to be speaking to the wonderful Layla Cunningham, who's Westminster City Councillor for Reform UK, just after this advert break. Thank you to Tarquin, and I'll see you in a moment.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show, and welcome to the show, Layla Cunningham, Westminster City Councillor for Reform UK. A rather rising star of the party. Layla, I keep seeing you everywhere, my darling. You're doing great work. How are you feeling today? Looking forward to conference?
I'm so excited, Alex. It's my first one and the energy is amazing. I'm very, very excited to be here. I'm very, very honoured.
Good. Well, I'm pleased to hear it. Now, time for the hard stuff. Now, I've gently welcomed you aboard HMS Common Sense. Let's talk Nadine Dorries. Some people say this is a massive scalp to get. What a brilliant defection for Reform UK. Other people are saying, why are we taking former Conservatives into our party? We're supposed to be different. And she wrote the online safety bill. And just before the break, my Paula Tarquin said, you can't trust these Tories. What if she's some sort of secret agent for Boris Johnson? What do you think about Nadine joining your party?
Listen, I think anyone can change their opinions and their minds, and I hope that's what she's done. I hope she's joined for conviction and not for political headlines. I am sceptical because she was, as you say, the author of the online safety bill, something that Reform and myself are very much against. We don't believe there should be any censorship or freedom of speech whatsoever. And don't forget, I think she was health minister in 2020 and was a big champion of lockdowns, which caused huge was a financial disaster, an economic disaster, and really, I think, tore at the fabric of our country. So I'm very, very sceptical.
Wow, I wasn't expecting that from you. I must admit, I thought you'd be sort of, pre-prepped with the reform. Isn't it wonderful? This is a huge victory for us lines, but rather, surprisingly, a little bit wary, to put it mildly. Let's talk about the fact that Nigel Farage has said there's going to be a general election in 2027. I've known that man a long time, and he reads the political tea leaves sensationally well, so I would imagine that he could be onto something. Do you think Reform UK are ready for an election that soon?
Yeah, we'll definitely be ready for an election that soon, and it's in the cards, isn't it? I mean, borrowing rates have gone up. She's going to increase taxes. The yields are going to go up, and eventually the markets might force Labour to actually cut spending. And we know how their backbenchers don't agree with that, so they'll either defect to Corbyn's party or rebel.
I mean, people say about Reform UK, and you've just sort of won a slew of councils, and you, of course, are now Reform UK councillor yourself, that there isn't much political experience within the party. How are they going to actually run a government? Not that I think the Labour Party nor the Conservative Party set a particularly high threshold when it comes to doing that effectively. But without having, let's say, the experience of someone like Nadine Dorries, who's been a minister, are voters right to be sceptical that come 2027 a load of newbies might be in control of the ship?
I think that's a huge selling point for us. I mean, we've seen Labour, who have a lot of political experience, and the Conservatives, who I think are the most successful party in history, and they have lots of experience, and they've destroyed our country in so many ways, and that's why they lost so dramatically, and that's why Labour's doing so badly in the polls. So I don't think political experience equals success. I actually think that lifetime experience in business or in just life experiences, it definitely means more, because I think people are tired of career politicians who have nothing else to fall back on and are scared of challenging the status quo of the establishment. But what you have in Reform is people who are doing it for the country, and it's an all or nothing approach. We must change.
You've become a rather key face of Reform recently, and I wonder, what are your own political intentions? Do you have ambitions to become an MP, to maybe become a minister, to run as London Mayor? Where do you see Layla Cunningham in 2027?
I'd like to do whatever I'm asked. Honestly, it is so exciting, and I don't say this lightly, to be part of Reform. I used to dread knocking on doors being part of the Tories, because I just get told off all the time, and I begrudgingly agree with them. And now I'm so excited to be part of this incredible movement that is really just wants the country's best, and I'll go wherever I'm asked. Honestly, it's an honour just to be part of it.
There you go. That's a very diplomatic and extremely political answer. Well, listen, Layla, good luck today at your conference. I'll be coming up to Birmingham a bit later myself, so hopefully we will pass each other and have a little drink together. Thank you so much for spending the time to come on the show. What a rather sensational interview. I was not expecting her to answer my question about Nadine Dorries as she answered it. I mean, perhaps this is actually extremely refreshing, that they're not all forced to repeat the same old lines from the press office and just sound like a load of mimics, all parroting pointless sound bites. And it's quite refreshing to have a little bit of diversity of opinion within the party. But at the same time, it's sort of, I don't know about you, it took me rather by surprise that she pointed out Nadine Dorries was the author of the online safety bill, which, as she says, is clamping down on free speech, was right at the heart of things as a health minister and a huge advocate for lockdowns. And to use Layla's own words, she is very sceptical. So I'd be interested to know, actually, how much that opinion is shared by other senior figures within Reform. I also want to know what you think about all of that, because when I asked this question to the audience last night, the response was overwhelmingly positive, with people saying this is a great get. We think Nadine coming over is absolutely fantastic. There was only a few voices who said, a little bit wary, until Tarquin today basically went, no, this is a disaster. And so when I spoke to Layla, I was expecting her to say what Nigel had said. This is very monumental. She's a great woman. She's got lots of experience. It shows really that the Conservatives are over, etc. But it wasn't quite the tone that she adopted. Interesting. Let me know your thoughts on that. 03444991000 is the number to call, or to WhatsApp, or to send me a voice note. 8722 is the number if you'd like to send me a text message instead. Write the word talk before you text. Let's catch up, shall we, with an old favourite of ours. It's Georgina in London. Good morning, Georgina.
Good morning, Alex. I just wanted to say about Nigel Farage, that man could win if a general election was called. He could win an election now.
But could he? But I think you're absolutely right. When you look at the political polling, I think that is almost written in stone were an election to be called at this exact moment. But the question is whether or not, as somebody who's only just become an MP himself at the age of 60, with only 4 MPs in Parliament, with no ministerial experience behind any of them, apart from now Nadine Dorries, if there were an election called, can he run the country?
Oh, come on, Alex. The man's done more mileage than the Space Shuttle Discovery. He could do it with his eyes closed, and we all know it. He knows what's going on. He's witnessed the worst government in history with the Labour Party. We've never seen so much scandal. The last time we saw this kind of scandal, it was Profumo scandal. So come on. You know, they couldn't do a worse job if they tried. And I've been listening to what has been said about the Fabian Society. And my darling, we've been living a Fabianistic governmental approach for the last goodness knows how long. They brought it in very stealthily. We've got no democracy, my love. We have no liberty. They've taken away liberty and democracy for the masses. They want total control. They don't want us to question authority. You know, we've had a breakdown in our cultural, social and economic destabilisation within our country, and it's been engineered this way, so we're absolutely terrified of what's to come, and we'll shout out, please, will you get more, you know, more surveillance within our country, when that will bring in digital ID, and after that we will have digital currency. This has all been micromanaged. In reality, my darling, we're welcoming the Communist Society, Big Brother, into our homes if this happens.
Oh, we ain't welcoming them. They're there already, Georgina. Do you know, I agree with every single word you say. I used to think it was just sort of mad tinfoil hat-wearing conspiracy theorists who talk about left-wing cabals secretly running things. But actually, when you look at everybody in positions of authority, those people who have access to the levers of power, many of them unelected and unaccountable, they do all seem to have the same provenance, and they certainly have the same ideology. And when you then go and look at what that ideology is, don't take my word for it, just go on the website of the Fabian Society. They want a borderless society. They want radical socialist revolution, but without the revolution bit. They want it to be done gradually. And so Georgina really does have a point. Georgina, thank you ever so much. Talking about dystopian realities, something caught my eye the other day, as it often does. I saw something on X and I was like, that's not true, is it? That's mad. But then I thought, I've got to click on this and see if this is true. And it's a story about local elections in Westphalia in Germany, which is a massive state in the west of Germany. The population is 18 million, and they've got local elections coming up on the 14th of September. For these elections, there are a total 20,000 candidates, so a pretty big operation. And yet 7 AfD candidates have died, and an economist sort of put something online going, this is almost statistically impossible. And I'm like, well, that's really weird, isn't it? I mean, I don't think people are going around bumping off AfD candidates. But I thought, I'm going to look into this. And when I read about it, I then found out that Germany's spy agency wrote a 1,000-page report on behest of the government saying that the AfD was an extremist organisation. And in being able to, because they wrote a report by a device in German law, that means now that they are legally able to spy on them, to put spies inside the party and to intercept all of their communications. And there I was thinking, rather than Germans worried about the odd crank in the AfD, doing a Heil Hitler, perhaps they should be more worried about the fact that the establishment in Germany is now officially spying on the opposition party, because that to me is pretty dystopian. So it doesn't surprise me when people read stories about AfD candidates mysteriously dying and suddenly come to radical conclusions, because we do already live in a pretty dystopian world, don't we? Anyway, if you want to learn more about that, you can go onto my Substack. Right, let's have a little voice note, shall we? This is John.
Just calling regarding Nadine Dorries defecting to Reform. Now, this one's a bit of a tricky one for me, because I feel that Reform really have to watch what they're doing, because they don't want to end up flooding themselves with ex-Tory MPs, as a lot of people still do not like the Tories, and especially up here more so in Scotland. I just think they're playing a dangerous game. They don't want to be Tory Mark II, basically.
Yeah, I mean, that is a point that has been echoed by a number of people in their messages, this idea that if you let too many in, you just kind of look like the same thing in a different costume. But is it wise, though, to take people with some ministerial experience? Because people will tell you, Liz Truss has told me on many occasions, that you don't understand the beast until you're in the belly of it, and quite what a quagmire of bureaucracy it is, and how the civil service will step in front of you at every single turn, and how it's almost impossible to get anything done. I remember asking Liz once, I said to her, what's your proudest moment as Prime Minister? And she said to me, when I announced the tax cuts, the budget, the mini-budget. And it surprised me, because of course that's the thing that everyone mocks her about, and it led to her downfall and so on and so forth. And I said, really? And she said, yeah. She said, because what you've got to understand, Alex, is it was the Governor of the Bank of England who did a fire sale on government gilts 24 hours before my budget happened, which crashed the economy, although technically it never crashed. And it was done deliberately. That is what she says. And she says, and actually you've got no idea how almost impossible it was to even manage to get that budget to the floor of the Commons, how many battles she had to fight with the civil service to even be able to stand there and announce a cut to the top rate of tax. And she said, it's a pretty messy, dirty, ugly, conniving, bureaucratic behemoth behind the scenes. So that is certainly something that whoever gets into government and wants to put in place their particular agenda, other than the Labour Party, because of course all the civil service seems to be leftists, is going to be facing a battle royale. Okay, right, let's take a short break now, and when I come back we're going to be talking about, well, some pretty astonishing, eye-opening statistics coming out of London regarding crime. That's after this.
Should she go?
No, absolutely not. I think she should wait. We should all wait for the independent watchdog to come to its conclusions, and I'm very much hopeful that they're going to find in her favour.
Why should we wait for the independent watchdog where, in this case, when Angela Rayner has called for people to resign long before we've had a report from an independent watchdog for Tories caught up in similar scandals?
A very good morning to you, by the way. Morning, Tory, with me, Mike Graham.
Just some breaking news for you coming out of Liverpool Crown Court.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the programme. Welcome to the Home of Common Sense.
Loads to talk about, I promise you that. Loads and loads and loads.
Yes, it's me again, your genial host, Kevin O'Sullivan.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Do you remember the National Lottery? Do you still play that? I haven't. It's not on telly anymore, is it? Feels like years ago I haven't seen that thing. I remember when everyone had their syndicates and Thunderball and all of that stuff. Do you know, my dad, who's a bit of an eccentric at the best of times, at one point kept a notepad where he'd write down the lottery numbers and decided he had a system. He'd sit there at night in the back of his lorry or whatever and look at all the numbers and be like, well, that one hasn't come up in a while. I'm going to pick that one this week. And I was just like, all right, son, never mind. We never won the lottery, unfortunately. But apparently winning the lottery is more likely than getting a stolen bike back in London. Police neglect is being blamed by cycling campaigners for so few positive outcomes of theft. Let's speak now to Harry Miller, who's a former police officer. Hello there, Harry.
Yeah, hi. Nice to
This
speak to you.
doesn't surprise me in the slightest. As someone who's just moved out of London, I've seen it all. I'm pretty sure that if I was being, mass stabbed in the middle of the street and phoned the Met Police, they'd be like, oh, well, never mind. Certainly that's what it feels like when you're a citizen of London. And I get the impression things like bicycle theft, they couldn't be bothered. I got a nice letter from the police saying we don't investigate this anymore when someone had smashed into my car. So I can't see them going, oh, someone's nicked my bike. Oh, yeah, we're going to get on that for you. And yet when I've spoken to former Met Police officers from, the previous generation, they actually said to me that back in the day, if you're a Bobby on the beat, you could phone up your local police station and say, oh, it's Mrs. Brooks from number 52. I'm on holiday for a week. Would you mind checking on my house when you do your rounds? I mean, how far things have changed.
No, absolutely. Now, if you're Jeremy Vine, for instance, and you get your penny farthing stolen, there's a chance that the police will turn up. But if you're not Jeremy Vine and you don't ride a penny farthing and it gets nicked, which, by the way, it will, unless you do all your riding in a velodrome in your own shed in your back garden, at some point you are going to run the risk and have your bike stolen. It's not prioritised because the police don't give a damn about private property. They've basically taken the communist line that the property is theft. So if your property gets stolen, so what? It's not important. Now, there is a handy life hack that I'm going to give the listeners of Talk TV today. That if you have your precious bike stolen, what you need to do is you need to tell the police that you believe that it was stolen as part of a targeted campaign of hate against you because of your protected characteristic. That will, in fact, get the police into action. But just owning a piece of property that's stolen doesn't matter that it's cost £3,000, £4,000, £5,000, £6,000, £7,000, that it's a precious item, something that you love, something that you've saved up for, something that you rely on. They don't care. The police are prompted into action when it has got something to do with identity politics, when it's got something to do with hate crime. Then you can move them into action. It's a handy life hack. I don't like to suggest using it, but if you want your bike back and you want police attention, that is the only way. Because it's not about resources, it's about priorities. The police have no problem finding 5 police officers with guns to arrest Graham Linehan. They have no problem at all sending police officers into a house in order to look for signs of Brexiteerism and search the bookshelves for Douglas Murray books. They have no problem with any of that. They have no problem in arresting somebody because they say, oh, you look a little bit like my lesbian nan. They have no problem with that at all. It's not about resources. It's about choices and it's about priorities. The police have lost their way. They have become a political a police force. They are not interested in the things that you and I are interested in, which is staying safe, being safe and having our property protected, not stolen, and if it is stolen, found by the police and the perpetrators locked up. They're just not interested in that.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And it's like the broken windows argument of New York back in the mean old days, which is when you let a tow rag nick even a Scotch egg from the shelf of Marks and Spencer's and do nothing about it, they then become audacious. When you let people push through ticket barriers and behave in a way that is antisocial, they become audacious. And I remember, I mean, the madness of this, right? So my car was parked opposite the pub at the end of my road, and someone had clearly gone into the side of my car and smashed it. It wasn't just a little ding, you know, it wasn't like, oh, there's a scratch on my car. No, it was like caved in, the whole front of it. And I thought, well, that's bad. And so I went to see the pub and I said, you know, your CCTV camera's on this. Oh, yeah, but we can't let you look at it because GDPR, the rights of the person in the... I'm like, what, the rights of the person who's driven into my car and nicked off? And so I didn't get to do that. And, you know, after sort of negotiating as a Green King pub, so I had to go up to head office and all the rest of it. I then went into, they took ages doing anything about it. I went to the police station, said, look, there's CCTV, because the Green King were like, oh, if the police ask for the CCTV. So I go into the local police station, they go, oh, you've got to speak to the transport police. Speak to the transport police, and they're like, oh, well, we can't go after that CCTV, but if you can find it, you might want to give it to the insurance company. I was just like, what is this? This is madness. Anyway, the woman at the pub looked at the footage, saw an Uber driver come down my road, probably completely unable to drive, probably bought his driving licence for 2 pence back in Somalia, smashed into my car, gets out the vehicle, looks and just goes, oh, well, and drives off. So the footage is there. And nobody wanted to touch it. Nobody wanted to do anything about it. I end up paying 800 quid excess. And that little tow rag who gets away with it is just carrying on, probably driving on our roads illegally, basically in the black market. And it infuriates me.
And rightly, and it should infuriate you. What we've actually done, what the police have done, they've privatised part of themselves. They've handed the responsibility for private goods to the insurance market. That's what they've done. They're not interested. Oh, here's a crime number, give it to your insurance company. Let them sort it out. Well, this is absolute cowardice. It's a neglect of duty on the part of the police. And it shows that they do not understand what is important to the common man and woman of the United Kingdom. We care about our property.
Well, but it's worse than that, actually, isn't it? Because not only have they privatised a certain amount and said, oh, here you go, delegate that to insurance companies, seemingly they seem to act on behalf of ne'er-do-wells as their bother boys. Because if someone phoned me up and said, I am triggered by a tweet that I saw online back in April, I feel unsafe, I'd be like, grow up, I ain't doing your dirty bullying for you, because I would know that that person was being vindictive. The last thing I would do, as somebody who's supposed to be a public servant paid for by the taxpayer, is on behalf of somebody who wants to destroy someone else's life, then go and turn up at their doorstep in a uniform. To me, the police are allowing themselves willfully to be used, exploited by people who, frankly, are bullies.
No, I absolutely agree. And this is a choice that has been made by the College of Policing. Repeated Home Secretaries have allowed it to happen on their watches, including Tory ones, and Chief Constables. They need to get a grip. They need to understand why we have the boys and women in blue. They need to understand Dixon of Dock Green. They need to understand something of our great British history, where we used to have a police force which was the envy of the world. No longer. We are now the absolute laughingstock. And worse than that, the police force have now become an active danger to normal British people. They are the enemy, in many cases, of British people, not their friend and their ally. And that is a terrible state of affairs to be in.
Oh, Harry, I was just feeling really happy today, and there you are. I've woken up again and realised we're still in dystopian Britain. But I could, a lot of what you said, so strident, so cut through, and so correct. Thank you ever so much. Harry Miller there, former police officer, telling it like it is. It is true, though. If someone phones up and thinks, I want to destroy someone's life by dobbing them into the police, and then the police go and do their dirty bidding, what on earth is going on there? I mean, that is really alarming, but that is what is taking place. When people get triggered by a tweet, it's because they are the vindictive one. They are the nasty one, and the police should have nothing to do with them. Right, we're about to take a very short break, but when I come back, we're going to be speaking to a former Labour special advisor about what might be Rayner's fate. So don't go anywhere. I will see you on the other side of this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back to the show. Beautiful Friday is here in London. I'm looking out at the skyline of London, and a very cheerful summer vista it is as well. There I was thinking that it was 40 days and 40 nights of rain and I had to go and build an ark. But no, we have been given a reprieve from the downpour, it seems today, certainly in this part of our wonderful country. And it does tend to sort of, when the sun's out, it does make me feel quite cheerful, really. It puts everything in a more positive light. And I can't help but sitting there and think, oh, what a beautiful day it is. A hypocritical politician is probably about to get the boot as well. It's all so glorious, isn't it? Let's speak to Paul Richards, who's a former Labour special advisor. Paul, listen, I've heard rumours that she's already agreed to resign and they're just waiting for their moment, probably when the guy, I forget his name now, the guy from the scrutiny committee who's going to be doing the dirty work of deciding if she's broken rules or not comes back with his verdict. She's not going to survive this, is she?
Well, you're going to hate what I'm going to say next.
Go on then.
I'm going to say we have to wait to see.
Yeah, well, no, indeed, we do.
I mean, it can go either way, let's be honest. I think it may be sunny out there, but it may be not so sunny for Angela Rayner, because if it comes back in the next couple of hours from the ethics advisor that she's broken the ministerial code or done something very deliberate to evade tax or some other egregious misdemeanor, then there is no choice, I don't think, other than for her to go. So the Prime Minister will be ready for that eventuality. On the other hand, if it looks like she was badly advised and made a mistake and, pays what she should and puts her hands up to that, then the calculus then is it better to keep her inside the tent or shove her out anyway? And and we just don't know at this stage. It's a sort of pivotal moment, really, for our politics over the next 2 hours.
Now, I remember the turbulent old days of the Tories when Sir Graham Brady seemed to live in a stationery cupboard constantly counting envelopes, that we were always waiting, weren't we, for some sort of ethics scrutineer to decide whether a ministerial code had been broken and whether that could trigger a recall petition, and whether that could trigger a by-election. Could things get serious enough if it is determined that she has actually willfully and knowingly dodged paying stamp duty? Could this actually end up going as far as there being an election in Ashton-under-Lyne, sorry?
I mean, our political system is such that she's got 3 jobs, okay? So one of them is a minister, and that's appointed by the Prime Minister. She's the Deputy Prime Minister and a minister running a department. He can get rid of her from that job in an instant. That's an instantaneous dismissal if he feels that's the right thing. The second thing is that she's the deputy leader of the Labour Party. That's elected by Labour Party members, and she would carry on in that role because there's no sort of recall for that unless that was triggered using whatever arcane Labour constitutional routes there are. And the third role, of course, as you identified, is she's a member of Parliament in Ashton-under-Lyne. She's got a house there, as we know. And then so, if the breach was such that it could trigger a recall petition, then again, that might happen, although that's less likely. Of the 3, I think the one that's sort of the most live right now is whether she carries on as a government minister or not, because I think that's the thing they're looking at, is did she breach the ministerial code? The other 2 is sort of more up to the electorate and the electorate to decide.
Do you think Starmer should have been a little bit more outright about this and sort of ahead of the narrative? Because whether or not she's breached the ministerial code, she's the Minister for Housing, and this is about something that smells a bit fishy regarding housing. That's her portfolio. Whether or not she's anything intentionally wrongly, it very much seems that she's not really across her own brief at the very least. She also happens to be the Minister for Election Integrity, and she's registered to vote in 3 different constituencies. And to me, something I don't think is being made enough of, quite frankly, is she's turned around and said, I'm going to go and live the opposite side of the country to my constituency. What sort of message does that send out? Surely Starmer should have said, look, the optics, love, aren't great on this. Regardless of your, complicated private life and personal situation and tax affairs, you're not really doing stuff in the sort of democratic spirit that your constituencies deserve you to actually show.
I don't think anyone's suggested she's not an assiduous, hard-working constituency.
Why is she choosing to live the other side of the country to her constituency? That don't look good.
Because MPs have to live in 2 places, and she's chosen to live in Hove for all of the family reasons that you allude to there. But, I mean, people do commute from Brighton and Hove to London for work on a regular basis.
But she's got a place in London.
Well, that's the bed in the Grace and Favour flat, isn't it? It was the same bed that Churchill used, I'm told, interestingly. So it doesn't belong to her, it belongs to
But if you've got a Grace and Favour flat, paid for by the taxpayer, then you go and move down to a luxury seafront apartment hundreds of miles away from your constituency, the people in Ashton-under-Lyne have a right to say you don't care about us.
I think that would be unfair, because I think she deeply does care. And I mean,
it doesn't look like it, does it? I mean...
her defenders, and I would include myself in this, we're using the information we have, and the information is that she wanted to be on the coast in a place that, within striking distance of London, to be for family reasons, for her own personal reasons.
But what are the family reasons? Because in theory, she has put all the money into a trust so her son can have the place in Ashton-under-Lyne, which kind of contradicts the idea I'm going to get a place down on the seafront if he's living all the way up there. None of this makes sense.
Well, I believe her family used that nice place down on Hove as well to see the mum, and she has a new partner, of course, in the same area, so that's the reason to be near him. But during the week, let's be clear, she's in Admiralty House in case there's a major incident. She needs to get to Cobra, which is 5 minutes away, underneath the Cabinet Office.
How often do you reckon she goes to Ashton-under-Lyne?
Well, she's there every week, as far as I know, because like all MPs, she's back at the weekends doing the constituency work of representing people's surgeries, going to, baby shows and whatever else it might be. I mean, she is an assiduous constituency MP as well. And we expect this from our MPs. We expect them to live in 2 places, do 3 jobs, work all the hours there are. And it's a hell of a life. And, we will see what happens next, because, as I said at the start of this, if it does seem like she has crossed that line and not been clear and open, then I can tell you, Keir Starmer will come down like a ton of bricks. But
it just seems to me maybe he should have done it a bit earlier, because the longer this goes on, the more he's looking a bit weak, in my opinion.
Well, he's a lawyer. So he's a lawyer. So
don't we know that?
Do you know what I mean? He'll always come in and wait for the evidence and weigh up the case clearly based on what's put in front of him. He's not somebody who's going to shoot from the hip. So
he was a lawyer. He's now a politician, and the top politician in the country. So perhaps he needs to learn to do that job. Let's talk about the defection of Nadine Dorries to Reform UK. What are your thoughts on that?
I thought it's an eye catcher for their conference, which is happening, as we know, right now. I'm told the Weatherspoons are doing very good business in that part of the world right as we speak. But I think the eye-catching nature of it underpins something a bit more dangerous for Farage, which is that his critics are going to call him a Tory reenactment society. The more Conservatives who flood into Reform, the more like the Conservative Party it becomes. And if he's got this whole shtick of being anti-establishment and against the old 2 parties and insurgents and all these things, if he just stuffs the gunnels with people who used to be Conservative members of Parliament, it's the opposite of what he's saying.
Interesting you say that. Interesting you say it's dangerous, because if there's one thing we know about the Conservatives, it's the fact they love to stab one another in the back. And earlier on, I was speaking to Layla Cunningham, who was a Conservative councillor for Westminster. She is now a Reform councillor for Westminster. And I asked her what she thought about Nadine defecting. What do you think about Nadine joining your party?
Listen, I think anyone can change their opinions and their minds, and I hope that's what she's done. I hope she's joined for conviction and not for political headlines. I am sceptical because she was, as you say, the author of the online safety bill, something that Reform and myself are very much against. We don't believe there should be any censorship or freedom of speech whatsoever. And don't forget, I think she was health minister in 2020 and was a big champion of lockdowns, which caused huge was a financial disaster, an economic disaster, and really, I think, tore at the fabric of our country.
I mean, Paul,
It's not exactly laying out the welcome mat, is it? I mean, that's a Reform councillor. They're saying, hang on a minute, this woman comes with all this baggage. I know Layla, she's a sensible person representing her constituents in for the council, and she's doing it through conviction, but she's flagging something important, which these people come with baggage. They come with a track record of being in a Conservative government, and it's going to make it a lot easier for people like me that don't want Reform to prosper to attack them for saying, well, it's just the same old Tories, just under a different guise. They've got a different colour badge now, but they're the same old guys you booted out last time.
I must admit, when I asked that question, Layla did not give the answer that I was expecting. You can even see my face in that interview. My eyes are sort of opened like a manga character. I was like,
well,
what?
Quite. I know, there's a Reform spin doctor behind that camera with his head in his hands, I should think. So these are not the lines to take. This is not what you're supposed to be saying. But but she speaks her mind, you know. And
I used to do that. I used to do that job for UKIP in the era of Godfrey Bloom hitting Michael Crick over the head with a conference brochure. Yeah, I remember those days.
Television, but not so good for the electoral credibility, but great TV, right?
I look back now and laugh, but I don't envy the political spin doctors of this world. It's a really difficult job. Do you mind if I ask you something a little bit left field? Because I've been doing a deep dive into the Fabian Society lately, which I find a fascinating organisation. I think you're a Fabian, aren't you?
I am very much a Fabian. I'm a former chair of the Fabians, and I'm on the executive of the Fabians, and I was at a Fabian event this week. So
you are the right person to ask for my sort of right of reply, which is, you know, so I sat there doing a head count of Fabians and the positions they hold, from the governor of the Bank of England. Someone said Mark Rowley was of the Met Police. I don't know. And then looking at all the Labour former peers, you're going to tell me he wasn't. So let's clarify that one. But all the former Labour PMs, half of the cabinet, so on and so forth. And I was like, OK, so we do need to know what the Fabian Society represent. And so, you know, there's research papers on there talking about borderless Britain and this, that and the other. And this whole idea that their emblem used to be a wolf in sheep's clothing. And it says on the website, we want radical outcomes, but we're going to do it sort of gradually and by stealth. And to me, as a righty, I'm like, that sounds really scary. What is the Fabian Society's intentions for Great Britain?
It's about evolutionary, non-revolutionary change. It was founded by people who said that these nutters out there on the barricades trying to cause a revolution are completely wrong. The way you change things is through debate and discussion and democracy, crucially. And you can only go as fast and far as the people allow. The Fabians don't have a sort of individual policy or manifesto. It's the individual writers would say something and they think that's worthy of debate. And it's what these days you would call a think tank. So it's just something that pumps out ideas. I mean, I wrote a pamphlet in the 90s on reforming the monarchy. Now, that wasn't Labour policy, but it was just something I said that I thought was worthy of discussion. And as you might imagine, in the 90s, it got a lot of heat and a lot of discussion. But it's about evolutionary steady change. I mean, the other emblem of the Fabians, not just the wolf one that gets the rounds on the internet, is a tortoise. Because in the old fable of the tortoise and the hare, our idea is change comes slowly but steadily, rather than racing ahead and trying to change everything all at once.
But if I were to use the terminology, and it's pretty much verbatim what I read on the website, that the desired end outcome is essentially radical socialism.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, they would describe themselves as socialists, but within the ethical, non-Marxist, non-revolutionary version of that. So it's not a far-left version like, say, I don't know, the Socialist Workers' Party or Jeremy Corbyn or something like that. It's about steady change, and lots of MPs sign up to it because they just like the space to debate things without, the whips breathing down their necks.
It's fair to say that they're extremely influential, though, because when I did a head count of prominent Fabians, we're not just talking about some sort of policy wonks in Policy Exchange in Whitehall drawing up a paper and giving it to the Conservative Party and saying, what do you think of this? We're talking about people who actually then become the Governor of the Bank of England, who become the Prime Minister.
Yeah, we've had lots of prime ministers. We've also had people like Mahatma Gandhi and Julius Nyerere, the founder of Tanzania, and all kinds of post-colonial leaders around the world take on these ideas, and they put their own gloss and spin on it. I didn't know some of the names you've mentioned. I did not know were members of the Fabian Society, but it's a membership organisation, and there's a website, so viewers can go and have a look at their website and see for themselves if they think it's an insidious, behind-the-scenes secret government. It really isn't.
You're not all sitting there in sort of, dark drawing rooms, sort of drumming your fingers on the table, plotting where you're going to put your next apparatchik.
No, there used to be some quite racy summer schools, I believe, back in the Edwardian period, but I don't think there's anything quite like that now. And it is a place where there's just debates and discussions. There's an annual conference. And ministers quite like it, shadow ministers quite like it, because they could just come along and make a speech. And it's not in Parliament. It's somewhere they can just ventilate ideas for discussion. And influence, well, we would point to things like the National Health Service. That was an idea that came up in a Fabian pamphlet. Things like a national minimum wage were being talked about 100 years ago. So there's ideas that were radical at the time that probably today are less radical because they're more established. So nothing to see here, I would say, Alex. But I mean, it is an influential left of centre think tank, but tiny. I mean, 10 staff and a relatively modest budget. drawn from members.
But a fair amount of political clout. Now, listen, before I let you go, Paul, Daryl in Blackburn has taken umbrage with something that you have said. He said, did Paul Richards think he was funny calling all Reform voters as inhabiting Wetherspoons, which shows directly the problem with Labour Party members as well as the government. I think Daryl is suggesting that sort of talking about all the Reform voters going to Wetherspoons, he thinks sounds, I'm going to put words in his mouth, but I think he's suggesting it sounds quite snobby.
Well, I was actually referring specifically to something a journalist said who's actually at the Reform conference, saying that the Wetherspoons was packed at 9:30 this morning. So it was verbatim reportage from somebody on the ground rather than what's been suggested there by Dan.
Wetherspoons does a brilliant breakfast. That is one affordable breakfast.
I mean, it's the full English that we all love and so much. Absolutely.
I'll tell you what, Paul. If I were able to dole out peerages, the first person on my list would be Tim Martin, because of what that man has done to restore beautiful old buildings, old theatres, old cinemas, to actually make a pint and a meal affordable for everybody, because the prices there are brilliant. And also, you know, he doesn't like music in his pubs, he doesn't like noisy televisions. He's like, this is a place where people should come together and talk. I think that man's well deserving of a peerage and a knighthood, personally. I think Wetherspoons is great.
Well, we're getting a peerage list coming up quite soon, I believe, and we're going to get the reshuffle done next week, and then I think there's going to be some new peers announced, so maybe he'll be on the list. Who knows?
I didn't know that. Thank you for giving me the tip off about that one. Reshuffle and peerage list next week, and I'm going to be sitting in the hot seat. So let's get you back to discuss that as and when that happens. Paul, it's always great catching up with you. We might be politically other sides of the spectrum, but I always appreciate the candour of Paul Richards. OK, right, let's take a short break now. And after the break, I want to hear from you guys. I have no doubt that the people behind the gallery are going to be rolling that Layla Cunningham clip again, because I'm sure that you guys have a lot to say about it. So let me know your thoughts. 0344499 1000 is the number to dial. Normal network rate 8722 is the number if you want to send me a text message. Right, talk before your message. You can as well, of course, leave me a voice note on 0344499 1000 or send me a WhatsApp. But yeah, pretty astonishing interview there. I was lost for words, which doesn't happen very often. So do let me know your thoughts. Let me know your thoughts on Angela Rayner as well. Should politicians be made to live in their constituencies? I mean, am I old school when I'm like, you know, back in the day, you had a local person go to Parliament to represent that area. That's what it's supposed to be. And so to sort of then go, yeah, I ain't going to live there anymore, I think it's a bit weird. You know, Nigel himself got absolutely lambasted when he went to America. Well, you're never in Clacton, you're not in your constituency. I think he spends quite a fair amount of time there. But I don't, you know, I don't know. Am I just too old school? Is it a case that actually these days you might have a constituency office doing the work of the MP and the MP's largely dealing with state affairs? Or should it be a case of, right, if you want to represent Gloucester, live in Gloucester? Let me know your thoughts. I might live and die by this broadcast. You never know if one day I enter politics. 034, we enter politics. I've done that already. In fact, I was an MEP for the South East, wasn't I? And I lived in... I split my time between London and Brussels, so actually I'm a big hypocrite. Never mind. 0344499 1000 is the number to call. Let me know your thoughts on a lot of it. I'll speak to some of you after this.
Tony Blair has been talking about digital ID for a long time.
Yeah.
Talks about it with vaccine passports, talks about it with national ID cards. In fact, every issue, the solution seems to be digital ID. What it's going to mean, can you imagine the people who are coming over in boats who are throwing their passports in the sea?
Right.
The idea that digital ID is going to be the solution is just preposterous.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Shall we have a little listen to some of your thoughts on WhatsApp? Because I love me a voicio. Here is Howard.
As regards Nadine Dorries going to reform, I don't think Nigel Farage shall let her anywhere near any position within the party of any influence. She's a Conservative, she always will be, and I think anybody jumping ship from one party to another shouldn't be trusted.
There you go. Howard's very resolute on which side of the debate he comes down on. Let's have a listen to what Steve thinks.
I have no problem with people like Nadine Dorries going to reform. Her inside knowledge and everything that goes with her and her views are aligned, I think, and she can bring a lot of good to reform. All power to reform's elbow. If the powers that be at reform think Nadine Dorries is someone who will add value, then who am I to question them? Good luck.
Yeah, I mean, of course, Nadine Dorries, formerly of the Conservative Party, is also formerly of talkTV, so I know Nadine pretty well, and I've always been a huge fan. I think she's an extremely brave woman, and her book, all about the dastardly goings-on inside the Conservative Party, is absolutely astonishing. I'd recommend it to anybody to read. And she's been a huge character, a very refreshing voice and face in politics, and she certainly wasn't shy about going up against her own party, was she? But also, you know, it leads me to think, I don't think Nadine would have made this decision without phoning Boris. Because we know how close they are. We know that she's basically his #1 fan and biggest cheerleader. And if she was going to say, you know, defect to the from the Conservatives to reform, I have no doubt, I don't know, but I have no doubt that she would have phoned up Boris and said, what should I do? Are you ever going to come back as Tory leader? Might you consider yourself going to reform? Would they even have him? I don't know. I just can't imagine her making that decision in a vacuum and not having discussed it with him, which to me is a bit of a talking point in and of itself. Shall we have a little listen to what Sally has to say about good old Wetherspoons?
I must say I'm a bit offended by Paul Richards. Is he suggesting that Wetherspoons is the only possible establishment visited by all reform supporters? I'll be voting reform and wouldn't drink in a Wetherspoons. I'm sure Georgina will be voting reform and very much doubt she's a frequent customer. Just rude.
What's wrong with Wetherspoons? I love Wetherspoons. I'll tell you what, I would sooner be down the Dog and Duck if it's a Wetherspoons pub than go to some of these fancy schmancy private members clubs in London with all the sort of artificial little dogs in handbags. I like myself a £4.99 fry-up and a pint for £2, and they're really good at championing British craft beers and ciders as well. They had cider month the other day as a West Country lass. I was like, this is amazing. And they have this way of salvaging beautiful buildings. It's things like old theatres, you know, Art Deco cinemas that are being shut down. And Tim Martin buys them up and turns them into boozers, which are the backbone of the community. So on this one, I don't want Wetherspoons bashing, and I don't want reform bashing saying everyone goes to Wetherspoons. Let people just do what they want to do. If you want to go to a hoity-toity club, go on. I sometimes find myself in them and sometimes enjoy it. But if you are the sort of person who wants a greasy spoon and a lager at 10 o'clock in the morning, then, you know, all strength to your elbow. Better for holding your pint. Right, let's speak to Ian, who's in Hemel Hempstead. Hi, Ian.
Hi, Alex. Good morning. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I just want to make the point, having listened to Layla Cunningham, people will have a lot of views about this, but my overriding view is that it's refreshing because Reform actually speak their mind, and she's not gone along with the party line or whatever the party line might be, that blind, support for whoever we say you've got to support. She's actually spoken her mind on this, and whatever you think of Nadine Dorries, I have mixed views on it. She's been honest about it, and you've got to give her credit for that.
I like honesty in politics. I do think it is very, very refreshing. But is this not the sort of undoing eventually of the Conservative Party when they all just, very publicly stabbed each other in the front? And that sort of disagreement that if you allow a sense of ill discipline to take hold within a political party, as you grow, it spreads and it then becomes very hard to manage. Is that a worry, do you think?
It's a slight concern, but you look at the fallouts with Rupert and Zia and all the rest of it, and they've made amends, and I think this is the formation of a party.
I don't think Rupert and Zia have made amends, have they?
No, not made amends, but the party have sort of recovered from that, and I think this is the kind of the norm in the form in the storming that goes on at the beginning of any new organisation, and I think this is where they are, and I think you've got to give them credit for that they're not just blindly towing the party line.
But look, I think there are many ways to slice and dice this one. I myself am just going to stay impartial on the lot of it. But I like truth in politics. I like candour. I think also that Layla is an extremely articulate, brilliant face for the party. I must admit, I was surprised what she said about Nadine coming over. She said she was sceptical. She didn't say, I don't want her here. But then did rattle off the political baggage that most concerns her. And I certainly don't think that it's going to be particularly good news for the press office of Reform UK today, having that particular line circulated. But I suppose, storm in a teacup, no doubt. Perhaps actually in the media we obsess too much on these things, that actually what matters is the policy a party wants to put in place. What matters is how well they run things, not who likes who and who says what.
I'm sorry, I just want to add one more point. Is that okay?
Yeah, of course.
Paul Richards, earlier on, the poster boy of the Guess Who game, I call him, because he's got his head on upside down. He talked about the peers being made next week.
Yes.
I was unaware of that. My only concern is we don't get a second Brighton peer because we've already got one.
I tell you what, I don't think a Reform are going to get any peers, and that to me is a massive abrogation of democracy, because they may only have 4 MPs, but they got a far higher vote share than the Lib Dems, who seem to have almost every blimmin' seat on those red benches. And when you see a party polling 30% of the votes, when you see second in 98 constituencies in the last general election, to be denied any representation in our upper house, I think is extremely problematic. So I hope when those peerages are announced, there are people coming out saying, look, this is not right. We're not going to let this one pass, because this is what the political parties do. They flood the red benches with all of their people to then try and stymie whatever it is the next government tries to do. And so you can see a situation where conceivably Nigel Farage wins the next general election, becomes Prime Minister, and there's a Reform government, and there's not a single Reform peer in the House of Lords. And so anything that Reform tries to do would be blocked. And I think that is extremely problematic. Ian, thank you ever so much for your call. OK, let's take a short break now. When we come back, I'm going to be joined by the political editor of The Sun, Jack Elsom.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Do you know, I'll tell you what about being a journalist. One of the reasons I decided when I was a kid I wanted to be a journalist, because I'm nosy. I've got an inquisitive mind. I just like knowing stuff. I like to be like plugged into the world around me. I find it all very fascinating. And the great thing about proper journalists, of which there don't seem to be many anymore, and I am talking about people who work at BBC and Sky and don't seem to have an inquiring bone in their body and seem to all just be sort of lemmings following a particular ideology. And basically not doing their job. The wonderful thing about being a journalist is you get to ask questions and you don't know what the person's going to say. Most of the time you assume things as a journalist, but every now and then there are moments in your job where you are a little bit lost for words because you think, gosh, that wasn't how I thought that would go. And earlier on, I was speaking to Layla Cunningham, Reform Councillor for Westminster, who's a sort of rising star in the party, a sort of brand new, fresh face, very articulate woman. I've met Layla. I think she's fantastic. And definitely sort of knows her own mind, which is extremely refreshing. But when I asked her earlier what she thought about Nadine Dorries defecting to the party, I wasn't expecting this. What do you think about Nadine joining your party?
Listen, I think anyone can change their opinions and their minds, and I hope that's what she's done. I hope she's joined for conviction and not for political headlines. I am sceptical because she was, as you say, the author of the online safety bill, something that Reform and myself are very much against. We don't believe there should be any censorship or freedom of speech whatsoever. And don't forget, I think she was health minister in 2020 and was a big champion of lockdowns, which caused huge was a financial disaster, an economic disaster, and really, I think, tore at the fabric of our country.
I'm joined now by political editor of The Sun, Jack Elsom. Jack, I wasn't expecting anything other than this is great, what a brilliant hire, what a senior figure. This shows that the Tories are toast, this shows that we attract talent, she's got ministerial experience. That's what I was expecting, that's what I thought would be the hymn sheet. And yet, when I asked Layla, she started off by saying she was sceptical, which you think, OK, fair enough, a bit of a deviation from what I think the party line would be. And then she went on to sort of do the rap sheet, all of the charges. And I must admit, I sat there sort of looking at down the barrel of the camera like a manga character. I couldn't quite believe it. Do you think that's going to cause Nigel a bit of a headache at the opening day of conference?
Well, I think that Nigel Farage is very good at brushing off any sort of any sort of fractions, and he's very good at sort of stealing the show. I do think, though, it speaks to a wider issue which Reform are going to have, because clearly there are going to be lots of Tories who are looking at these poll ratings and going, there's not a very good chance of me winning my seat or winning back my seat if you're a former MP, and the best prospect of doing that is with the Reform banner. Now, clearly Nigel Farage has said that he wants some experience. Obviously, Reform have never been in government, so having people who have served as ministers might be able to add some political heft to his team. And obviously, it punches the bruises of Kemi Badenoch, a big scalp going across. But at the same time, I think there is a danger that Reform could become too saturated with the types of people who they've been attacking for the past year. I mean, Nadine Dorries, obviously a cabinet minister, very close to Boris Johnson, who, let's not forget, oversaw that massive wave of immigration, which many Reform supporters totally oppose. And so I think that the problem will become, over the next few months, over the next few years, when more Tories are going to jump ship, there is going to have to be a time, I think, where Nigel and the rest of the team go, actually, you know what, we don't want you.
Is there also a sort of a note of caution here to Reform, which is you saw how the Conservatives tore themselves limb from limb with a sort of internecine fire, and that you might be minded to not let that culture into your own party, because, of course, Reform themselves have had a few issues with people who are MPs and are now no longer MPs. I don't want to get into all of that. But the infighting within the Conservatives is what did them in.
Yeah, exactly. And what you don't want to do is, listen, all parties, if they want to win elections, have to be broad churches. You look at Labour, they have sort of people on the soft centre, they have people on the hard left. You look at the Tories, you have wets, you have people that basically are, reform light. And even in reform, they sort of all stand for the same thing. But you do have splinterings, and obviously there have been people who have left the reform fold because they think they're not far enough to the right, they're not hard enough on migration. It's always going to be, like families, there's going to be unhappiness, there's going to be rows, but if you have that common cause, I think that that's where you really succeed. The problem with that, I think, is that if you are picking people from a party like the Tories, who you have spent so much time attacking, and not just ex-MPs, people that have never been near government, people like Adam Holloway, for example, who came across, seems pretty harmless. If you have people who are central to the Boris Johnson project, as Nadine Dorries was, I know she wasn't in the Home Office when migration hit record levels, but she was a massive cheerleader and defender of Boris Johnson for many, many years, you're going to have an issue there. And I think that Reform probably, at some point, need to start saying, you know what, actually, we don't want you, because when you were in government, your record isn't that great.
I mean, Reform are really riding high at the moment. The latest polling putting them on over 30%, while Labour's languishing down at 19%, and perhaps might be sinking even lower. Now, your colleague at the time, Stephen Swinford, has just put out on X that it sounds like the exchange of letters is happening, still not formally confirmed, but it appears to be done. Angela Rayner is out of government. I think that sort of became a foregone conclusion, really, by this morning. But what do you think may happen going forward? Is it just going to be a case of Rayner retires to the back benches and runs her constituency from the sunny climes of Hove? Or might there even be, the prospect of there being some sort of recall petition if she seems to have not just broken the ministerial code, but does something which is in breach of the parliamentary ethics?
Yeah, it's all in flux at the moment. Speculation is at fever pitch, and I think any moment now we're expecting that report to drop from Sir Laurie Magnus, and I think that he probably will throw the book at her and end up with her walking. Obviously at the moment that hasn't been confirmed, so we can't get too ahead of ourselves, but it does seem, speaking to people in government, that is definitely the expectation this morning. What happens to Angela Rayner? Listen, I don't think she's going to go quietly as such. She'll probably give Keir Starmer some warm words, saying she's enjoyed serving in his government and is going to go to the backbenches where she will support him. However, I think that she might be speaking with forked tongue during that, because for this, and for millions, sorry, not millions, but for lots of left-wing voters and lots of Labour members, she will be something of a martyr. And when she is not constrained by cabinet collective responsibility, you can probably bet that she is going to be seen as a bit of a red queen over the water. People that think that Keir Starmer hasn't been left-wing enough, and she might punch his bruises in things like welfare reform or two-child benefit cap, wanting him to tax more people, stuff that the country is totally opposed to, but which Labour members, which are still, even after lots of them left when Jeremy Corbyn did, are still quite a left-wing membership. And I think that Angela Rayner, if there was a Labour leadership election tomorrow, barring all of the scandal stuff before it happened, would probably walk it. And so I don't think that she's going to go quietly whatsoever. And actually getting rid of her and all the trouble that she's caused, the trouble could actually get much worse if she's in the back benches outside the tent.
Is it even possible that she might not stay in the Labour Party but be tempted over to go and join her old comrade Jeremy Corbyn? Because there has been some speculation from the gossip merchants of Westminster that buying a property in Hove could be a tactical move because her own seat in Ashton-under-Lyne is likely to fall to Reform, and perhaps she's sizing up a new constituency where she thinks she might be re-elected.
Yeah, well, she'd have a fight in her hands with Peter Kyle, her cabinet colleague, if the current MP for Hove, if that happened. But listen, it's no, it's no bones about the fact that Ashton-under-Lyne, her Greater Manchester constituency, is really under threat for reform at the next election, and she'd probably be hoping that her own personal popularity in the area could see her through. But what are her constituents going to think if she suddenly up sticks to go to Hove? It does seem like a bit of a tactical decision, especially when you get into the whole shenanigans about which is actually her primary residence residence. Well, one's her primary residence for council tax reasons, but one's her first home for stamp duty reasons. It's not very clear cut. But obviously, Angela Rayner at the moment, I don't see her joining the sort of the Corbyn party, the Zara Zoltana, your party, or wherever it's become called, because I'm not sure their chances really of electoral success are going to be big. And also, she's got so much support in the Labour Party in terms of the membership, in terms of people on the backbenches, that I think that she'd see her chances as more likely to succeed if she stayed in the Labour tribe. And so I don't see her defecting anytime soon. There might even be a way back for her. You know, under Tony Blair, Peter Mandelson came and went in various scandals, was the ultimate political survivor. Angela Rayner maybe might be able to do the same. And listen, I think that Keir Starmer, having to get rid of her, I think that he almost certainly will have to, because it has just become so damaging and the story isn't going away. It's about hypocrisy. She's the housing secretary. She's been calling for more taxes. She was the first one to call for heads to roll under the Tory government. But it could cause him a world more pain if she is becoming incredibly anti-Labour, anti-government on the backbenches. And so, yeah, it's a really tough decision for Keir Starmer to make today, and I'm not sure we've got long to wait to see what he's decided.
Before I let you go, Jack, you are there in Birmingham at the Reform conference. Now, as political editor of The Sun, what are you looking out for today in terms of the menu of what's on offer, the speakers on stage? Are you waiting to see if there's any sort of great sort of reveals of defectors? Is it about sort of trying to get the gossip? Is it about listening if there's any policy announcements? What do you think, what's your eye on today?
I think two things, really. I think that I think the Reform's next big challenge is to show that it's not just the Nigel Farage show. He is clearly a fantastic orator, one of the most charismatic and able politicians of our time. But to get into government, you can't be a one-man band. And I think that having more talent around, and we've seen some of the likes of it come through. Obviously, he's got his 4 MPs, he's got Zia Youssef, he's got a few councillors. But really giving them a chance to shine, I think, will show that they are ready to take that next step, which is the Reform slogan for this conference. And then also, I'm not sure we're going to get incredibly detailed policy announcements come out of this. I think we might get some personnel changes, seems to be the suggestion. But anyway, let's see what Nigel says at 4 p.m. We know he's a sort of a political rock star to all of the assembled Reform members here. He's incredibly good at stirring them, whipping them up, and that sort of feel-good factor can't be downplayed when the other two parties are really down in the dumps at the moment.
Jack, I'll see you up there. Let's have a bevy a bit later. Jack Elson, political editor of The Sun in Birmingham at Reform UK's conference. Right, we're going to take a short break now, but when we come back, we're speaking to the wonderful Charlie Downs, who's campaign director at Restore Britain, about, well, there's always migration stories to talk about. I won't spoil the fun. Let's learn what they are after this break.
It's looking very difficult for her. I mean, she's a first-class hypocrite.
Yeah.
She spent years and years attacking Tories over tax, over second homes. It's just the sheer hypocrisy of these people, you know. Ever since they've gone into government, it's been one scandal after another, you know, accepting freebies, you know, matters of private jets. Well, she should have resigned already.
Yeah.
She should have resigned already.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. I didn't realise that Wetherspoons was going to become such a talking point. Paula says the Rawson Springs Wetherspoons in Hillsborough, Sheffield, is an old swimming bath with the old decor still there. It's awesome. On Wetherspoons, Alex, and beautiful buildings, check out Paisley's The Last Post. It's a stunning building. Barbara in London, though, not so keen. Wetherspoons refused entry to a regular customer wearing a Union Jack dress. They banned England and UK flags, but will no doubt allow Scottish, Welsh, Irish and Palestine flags. You won't catch me there. Although I don't imagine that that's sort of up to Martin Strasser to be sort of banning England flags. I love Wetherspoons too. They always do a great breakfast, and anywhere we've gone up and down the country, we've chatted with like-minded people and realised we all have so much in common. There you go, lots of Wetherspoons fans. I'm eyes on the TV screens because Angela Rayner is seen at the moment walking in to number 10 Downing Street, smooching with some geezer by the door. Don't know who that is. But according to rumour, she is about to receive her marching orders. It is believed that Angela Rayner is going to be made to resign from her position, I assume, of Deputy Prime Minister and Housing Minister. We have to wait to learn. So Keir Starmer said he's going to base this all on the report of his ethics advisor, Sir Laurie Magnus. So one assumes that that report basically says, do you know what, something sketchy's gone on here. The optics ain't very good, which begs the question, if it's, if it's bad enough, if it's decided she's done something wrong, aka dodged 40 grand's worth of tax, to me, that's not just don't be a minister, that's don't be a member of Parliament. Thank you very much. So, actually, you look at Reform UK, it's their conference today, of course, and their MP, what's his name now, Ted? It's just gone from my mind. James McMurdoch, that's it. You know, there's moments when you're speaking live, like, who's that again? No, lovely James McMurdoch. James McMurdoch being investigated for financial affairs regarding COVID loans and the party, and he actually, himself actually, stood down from the party and said, I'm going to step down from the whip while this is all being investigated, such as the standards that he says he wants to see in politics. Now, if she has knowingly and willfully dodged tax, and if that is what this report finds out, is it enough that she just goes as Deputy Prime Minister? Should the head roll even further down the hill? I'm pleased to say that Charlie Downs, Campaign Director of Restore Britain, joins us now. Charlie, great to have you back on the programme. We're talking migration, aren't we? Have you seen these Home Office digital ads that they're putting up to deter would-be boatios in France?
I have. I mean, some of them say if you arrive by small boat illegally, you now risk being deported. Now that is fighting talk, Alex, if ever I heard it. I mean, risk being deported, like the idea that there's any suggestion that you won't be. They also reference the one in, one out policy deal that we have with the French, which has done nothing thus far to deter small boat migrants from making the crossing. And that's because it's basically a plaster on a bullet wound. I mean, we have to deal with the pull factors that our country has. Emmanuel Macron was right to point those out when he made this deal with Starmer. But I mean, honestly, it's just so weak. Like these adverts are laughable, and you can bet your bottom dollar that the people traffickers and those coming illegally are looking at those adverts and laughing. Like, these people are laughing at us. We are being humiliated on the world stage by this issue.
I must admit, when I saw it, you know, as a journalist, you learn very early on it's all about the top line. What is the first line? What is the headline? How is that written? And it starts off going, there is a treaty between UK and France. I mean, do you honestly think Mohammed from Sudan's going to be, oh, wow, there's a treaty between the UK and France. I better go down gov.uk and find out what that's all about.
You're so right. I mean, again, I think if these people were to read it, they would be laughing at us. And quite frankly, I think we have to confront the reality. The only language that certainly the criminal people smugglers understand is force. Like, we can't allow these people to get to our country in the first place. And if they do somehow arrive here, they need to be detained and deported immediately. This whole fiasco, Alex, I'm almost sick of talking about it, because it's just, you know, we go in circles talking about solutions because the solutions are so self-evident and so obvious. But we are governed by a class of people who just don't seem to even really see this as a problem. They see it as some kind of procedural, managerial, you know, issue, when actually at the ground level, it's making people really angry. It's making people feel unsafe in their own communities. I can't remember a issue, Alex, in my sort of time being politically conscious, possibly since Brexit, that has ordinary people, you know, people in my own family, people, you know, my friends who are not ordinarily interested in politics, who have them, that has them so incensed. I mean, people are so furious about this issue. I mean, just around me where I live, I'm seeing a lot of flags going up. I'm seeing flags on roundabouts, flags on signs, flags on, you know, lampposts and all the rest of it. And it shows you the level of politicization that this issue is causing. People who otherwise would care nothing for politics, but the political is infringing upon their own life and making them feel unsafe.
I couldn't agree more. I like the flag stuff. Let's keep that going. Charlie Downs, fantastic to catch up with you. Thank you ever so much. Now, I can report that Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer has received the report by his independent ethics advisor into Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner's tax affairs and is considering its findings. So let's keep our eye on that one. It seems to me that there's probably not many minutes left now for Rayner as Deputy Prime Minister, but you never know. The report by Sir Laurie Magnus might actually say it's all an honest mistake. So let's, sounding like Sir Keir Starmer now, let's wait and see what it actually finds. I'll keep my eye on that and let you know as soon as we have a verdict. In the meantime, shall we catch up with some of you? Because we've got Jenny in Surrey on the line. Hi, Jenny.
Hello. I'm just a little bit annoyed about the gentleman from the Labour Party who was saying that the Reform people are going to be in Wetherspoons. I live in New Malden, and our Wetherspoons is an old police station. And it's kind of appropriate. We have no police, but we've got loads of pubs. And I just wanted to say there are lots of people around here who are what you would describe as traditional Labour Party people. We are working class, we don't have loads of money, we only have one house, and we pay our taxes. So maybe not, I don't know. But the fact of the matter is, when I was bringing my daughter up, as a single parent, I could only afford to go to the Wetherspoons for birthdays and Christmases. And there are lots of people like that. And it's not about being cheap or being an alcoholic. It's about living within your means.
I mean, this is it. Pubs are the backbone of this country. They're a quintessential British thing. Every pub is a parliament. And I think that nobody, frankly, when you look at the amount of employment, when you look at the amount of local beers that are in Wetherspoons pubs, when you look at the salvation of historically and culturally significant buildings, I would argue there's no one who's done more for the hospitality industry than Tim Martin. Thank you so much for your call, Jenny. To remind you that Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer has received the report by his independent ethics advisor into Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner's tax affairs. Oh, I can also now let you know that Angela Rayner has resigned as Deputy Prime Minister and as Housing Secretary. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. She has gone. Angela Rayner has resigned as Deputy Prime Minister and Housing Secretary. Looking at the screens, we've just broken that first, ladies and gentlemen. So I think we deserve a well-earned rest, don't we? But before I do go to break, let me know your thoughts. Is it enough that she is now no longer Deputy Prime Minister and Housing Secretary? Should she be considering her position as a politician? Because we know that this isn't just about potentially dodging tax. She doesn't even live anywhere near her constituency. I think that stinks. So there you go. Angela Rayner's tenure as our Deputy Prime Minister is now over. There will be, I think, an election within the Labour Party to replace her. We still don't know what is in that report, but we're going to find out soon enough, aren't we? So let's pick up on that story after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, it's a sunny day in London, but I can tell you what, it is raining somewhere in the country because Angela Rayner has now formally resigned from her position as Deputy Prime Minister and Housing Secretary. I think we all realised this morning that this was, a foregone conclusion. But we understand that this is, in theory, based upon the report of Sir Laurie Magnus, who is the ethics advisor to Sir Keir Starmer. Sir Keir Starmer saying there's a procedure to follow, and I'm going to wait to see what that report says. Now, it doesn't say that she is sacked on account of what the report says, but one assumes that as she has technically resigned, did she jump or was she pushed? The report probably ain't gonna be pretty. I want to know what's in it. I'm sure we're going to be getting the detail of that, or perhaps actually, is this going to be in the public domain at all? Is it just going to be now she said, I've chosen to resign because it doesn't look good, but I did nothing wrong? They're going to try and hide that report under a big old rock, because if that woman willfully didn't pay £40,000 worth of tax, to me, that isn't just a question of her credibility as Deputy Prime Minister and Housing Secretary. To me, that is a question of credibility of whether that person should even hold any form of public office. Let's speak now to Henry Hill, Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, who knows a good thing or two about politics, and probably, having lived through the Boris Johnson era, and we did interviews together on this, might even know a thing or two about the Standards Committee. Where do you think this might lead, Henry? Is she going to go quietly to the back benches and then, a quick headache for Sir Keir Starmer? Could this now escalate into something more?
I mean, the thing that we don't yet know, as far as I can see, and obviously as you've just broken the story, we are sort of trying to keep track on this in real time, is whether or not she's going to resign as deputy leader of the Labour Party. Because whilst the Conservatives, I don't want to pretend they're any great shakes at internal organisation, but one thing they do get right that Labour chooses not to, is that in Labour, the leader and the deputy leader are elected separately and they have their own mandates. And Starmer can't get rid of her as deputy leader of the Labour Party. So I imagine at this point, he'll probably want her to stay on, because if she's not got any government brief, she's not going to be in the public eye. Having a party position is much less important and powerful when you're in government. But if she steps down, then there's going to have to be a leadership contest, a deputy leadership contest, a battle for the soul of the Labour Party, if you like, another hugely attention-grabbing, time-consuming drama focused on the internal divisions of the Labour Party rather than Sir Keir Starmer's professed priority of delivery.
But this is the thing, I now want to know specifically what that report says. I think as a public we deserve to know what that report says. This is a woman who technically, if Sir Keir Starmer had, shuffled off his mortal coil, would be running the country at this point. So I want to know whether this report has found out if she willfully didn't pay that tax, what is going on with all the nitty-gritty around the trust fund. I think that this potentially is really quite serious. Do you think that actually the way that the Labour Party might try and manage this, as you said, is to sort of shuffle her off to the back benches, keep her as deputy leader so they keep her in play and basically say, she will go mea culpa, I did it because I didn't want to bring any problems to the Labour Party, which I love. And then, it sort of then ends up being business as usual with as little China broken as possible.
So the interesting thing about the Magnus report, I mean, one, I do have to say last year I did write a paper saying that I think his position should be abolished. I think that functionally the whole procedure around the ministerial code, which we didn't have for most of the time that we've been a democracy, creates enormous problems where effectively it is not impossible, but it is extremely difficult for any prime minister to keep a minister or secretary of state against the advice of this official, which means that this official has absolutely enormous power. And as you say, there's no guarantee that we're going to be able to see the results or the reasoning, right? Fundamentally, it's a political process. And I think that Starmer should have had to own the decision himself about whether or not Angela Rayner left or stayed. Of course, with something like this, now that she has gone and she has fallen on her sword and she's gone to the backbenches, there is a legitimate argument to make about the extent to which it is a personal and private affair. And personally, I am sceptical of the idea that we are entitled to see 100% of
I give you this, by the way. We now understand that Angela Rayner has resigned from all 3 positions, which makes it sound that she's no longer Deputy Prime Minister, no longer Housing Minister, and therefore also, if it's all 3 positions, no longer Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, which suggests to me that that report ain't gonna look good.
I mean, almost certainly. I do think there were debates. Obviously, I'm less plugged into Labour circles directly than I am the Conservatives for obvious reasons. But there were debates about whether or not Rayner should keep or lose that role. And apparently, the advice from her own allies was, you don't want to be Banquo's ghost at the feast. Right? I think the last person to hang around as deputy leader without a ministerial role was George Brown in the 50s or 60s. And it was a fairly miserable existence. But this is now going to be a challenge for Sir Keir Starmer because, one, as we've already seen with things like the welfare vote, his parliamentary party is extremely divided over, they're all nominally supportive of him, but not any of the things that he keeps trying to do. And there are more battles to come. The recent advisors that he recruited into Downing Street to beef up his operation, they were the ones at the Treasury who were responsible for the spending review that caused the mutiny. And at the same time, a deputy leadership contest, that's not just for the MPs. That's Labour members out in the country. That's trades unionists who've signed up. So, I mean, obviously for politics watchers like us, it's great. It's another sort of contest. It's another thing that's going to generate acres of copy and provide a fascinating insight into the mind of the Labour Party. But if you're a government that's already finding things horrendously difficult and has just last week tried to deliver, or this week even, a pivot back towards delivery, having an internal contest over your deputy leadership position is the very last thing you want.
Kemi Badenoch has just put on X, Britain deserves better. She accused Sir Keir Starmer of being too weak to sack Angela Rayner as his deputy. Angela Rayner is finally gone, but it's only because of Keir Starmer's weakness that she wasn't sacked 3 days ago. Britain deserves better. I mean, this is the thing. He is a lawyer. He likes to follow due process, but he isn't a lawyer anymore. He is a political leader. He is the Prime Minister. And do you think that he was actually playing his cards very sensibly and safely, managing a political storm within his own party by delegating responsibility to process? Or does he essentially just look spineless at this point?
I mean, this is my objection to the role of the standards of the ethics advisor as it currently exists, which is that it does give prime ministers this get-out clause, but only as long as they do what the advisor says. So on the one, you've got this really perverse incentive where a prime minister can be insulated from criticism, but only by divesting themselves of the responsibility for forming a cabinet which we expect them to have. I think it would have been very easy for Starmer, especially for Starmer, to actually reserve judgment on Angela Rayner and say, look, I respect this process perhaps more than I should, but I made an awful lot of it during the Boris Johnson thing. I am going to wait until Sir Laurie Magnus reports, and then I am going to make a decision. Instead, what he actually did was he really came out hard for Angela Rayner this week. So did Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor. They really put themselves, went out to bat for her. And now it turns out there seem to be big problems with the story she gave in that interview on Wednesday, and now she's gone. That's the risk I think is quite difficult to explain. Of course, depending on which position Kemi Badenoch was talking about, it may simply be the fact that he recognised that, one, she's still very popular with much of the Labour Party, and two, he couldn't, she's now gone, he couldn't get rid of her as deputy leader. And I think that when you're in, that's a dynamic that's very, very different to the Tories. Ultimately, in a Conservative government, every single minister, every single party official, they serve ultimately at the behest of the leader. That is not the case in the Labour Party, and it creates some very strange dynamics.
We love strange dynamics in this industry, so I'm looking forward to picking up all the threads of this story next week. I'm doing 10 to 1, Monday to Friday, actually. Thank you ever so much, Henry Hill, Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, navigating us through the breaking news there that Angela Rayner resigns from government. She is no longer the Deputy Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. She is no longer the Housing Minister of the United Kingdom. And we understand, although we haven't had it 100% confirmed, that she is no longer the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, which means there will be a deputy leadership election now in the Labour Party. Never Rayner's, but it paused, doesn't it? So, Kia, we're going to take a short break now, but when I come back, we're going to be joined by Kate Ferguson, the political editor at The Sun on Sunday.
very good morning to you, by the way. Morning, Glory, with me, Mike Graham.
Just some breaking news for you coming out of Liverpool Crown Court.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the programme. Welcome to the Home of Common Sense.
Loads to talk about, I promise you that. Loads and loads and loads.
Yes, it's me again, your genial host, Kevin O'Sullivan.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there and welcome back to the show. We know now that Angela Rayner has gone and gone because she's no longer the Deputy Prime Minister. She is no longer the Housing Prime Minister and she is no longer the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party. We do not yet know what is in the report of Sir Laurie Magnus. One assumes it didn't come up smelling of roses, and I think we, the public, need to know what those conclusions are. But this does mean, of course, a deputy leadership election now on the horizon for the Labour Party. And not just that, we understand as well that next week Sir Keir Starmer, in the wake of all of this, may be conducting a reshuffle of his cabinet and making a few peerages. Let's speak now to Kate Ferguson, political editor at The Sun on Sunday. I mean, I think we woke up this morning, especially when her own lawyers went, come on, this is throwing us under the bus. We didn't give her this advice. Don't try and buck past to us. Did it seem to me it was going to be a foregone conclusion that she was going to be forced out of office? She's saying that she takes full responsibility for this error. Change of tone for her, given that she said literally about 24 hours ago it's all someone else's fault. But this isn't particularly settling news for Sir Keir Starmer, is it?
I mean, this is huge. This is bombshell political news, not just in Westminster, but the country. I was looking down when we started just there because I'm reading the resignation letters. We've had that exchange of letters between Angela and PM Keir Starmer now. And there's also a letter from the ethics chief, you know, whose report did for her, where he says, I was just checking at the very end, he finds that while he appreciates personal life is difficult for politicians, that it can be hard juggling different things. You're in under a lot of scrutiny, that she should have taken greater care getting the correct advice and making sure that she paid her correct tax bill. So that's his conclusion, and that is why we've seen Angela Rayner quit today and Keir Starmer accept her resignation. Look, Keir Starmer's a year into his premiership. He's had 3 resets, and now he's lost his Labour deputy. Labour Party are going to be gutted that they've lost Angela Rayner. Here she was, this kind of straight-talking, colourful, kind of working-class hero. She totally different to quite straight-laced, prim, proper Keir Starmer, and now they've lost that from the front benches. They've lost that from the senior party role. So it's really, really bad news for Keir. Obviously sad news for Angela, whose political career had been doing so well before this crisis and this scandal of the past few weeks. And also a lot of soul searching for Labour, I think, in the weeks ahead.
I mean, quite gentle words, it seems, at the end of Sir Laurie Magnus's report there. Should have taken greater care. It's hardly the sort of damning verdict that perhaps I was expecting. Actually, I can read here what it says in his letter to the Prime Minister. It is highly unfortunate that Ms Rayner failed to pay the correct rate of stamp duty on this purchase. Highly unfortunate. Really? Particularly given her status and responsibilities as the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government and as Deputy Prime Minister. She believed that she relied on the legal advice she had received, but unfortunately did not heed the caution contained within it, which acknowledged that it did not constitute expert tax advice and which suggested that expert advice be sought. Sir Laurie said it was deeply regrettable that the specific tax advice was not sought. I believe Ms Rayner has acted with integrity and with a dedicated and exemplary commitment to public service. Really? I consider, however, that her unfortunate failure to settle her stamp duty tax liability at the correct level, coupled with the fact that this was established only following intensive public scrutiny, leads me to advise you that in relation to this matter, she cannot be considered to have met the highest possible standards of proper conduct as envisaged by the Code. Accordingly, it is with deep regret that I must advise you that in these circumstances I consider the Code to have been breached. Now, look, reading this, Kate, when it comes to the advice given to her, because it says here in black and white, verbatim, that she was told to go and get expert advice over this matter. To not go and get expert advice on whether you should pay or not £40,000 worth of tax, to me, smells like she was pulling a fast one. I'm sorry, but if someone says to me, you've got to go get expert advice, you might owe 40 grand to the tax man, I will be going to get that expert advice. I ain't pulling my punches and playing games with that. And I don't understand how, especially someone in public office can somehow let that just fall between the cracks. I read this and I think, Sir Laurie, I think you should refer yourself to yourself, Sunshine.
Well, I think these sort of civil service advisors often are quite measured in their tone and quite formal. So you need to you wouldn't look to Sir Laurie if you're looking for kind of explosive rhetoric. But the crucial thing here is the finding he makes, which is that it was careless, that she should have sought that advice and that she was advised to seek that extra advice. So, what he does is he finds fault, and that is the crucial thing here. Right, you've got to pay your taxes. We all have to pay our taxes. No one likes paying their taxes. It's quite a horrible experience handing over half your wage to the tax man at various points, but you have to pay your taxes. If you're in Labour, a Labour deputy leader, someone in charge of housing, and someone who really went after the Tories when they were found when certain ministers on that side hadn't paid all of their taxes, well, you've got to be whiter than white. You've got to make sure that every tax bill, you're just double checking that there isn't a kind of nothing strange is at work there. You're paying the full amount. In many ways, it's quite tragic for Angela. Here was a sparky, pugnacious, charismatic, talented politician that had pulled herself up, right, from the council estate she grew up in Stockport. She had faced challenges which lots of other politicians wouldn't face. She's scrappy, she's impressive, and she'd got all the way to the top, but she's been undone by the very thing she helped bring other Tory ministers and governments down for, which is a scandal, a ministerial propriety scandal.
Do you know, I can see Angela now, looking at thinking the Labour Party's in turmoil. If Nigel Farage is right, we got an election in about a year and a half anyway, and possibly eyeing up a career outside of politics. If I was her, I'd be on the phone to Loose Women going, you've got a spare seat there for me, ITV, because I can imagine her being snapped up by such a programme, and that she might have a very bright future ahead, because she does have a lot of charisma. She is somebody who is instantly recognisable and certainly doesn't mince her words. We can give you a little bit of what was in the letter from Angela Rayner to the Prime Minister today, a very formal exchange of paperwork done by the two of them, as is protocol very often in politics. Might not be the same as a conversation that actually happened behind closed doors. But in her letter to Sir Keir Starmer, she said, I deeply regret my decision to not seek additional specialist tax advice, and took full responsibility for this error, as she resigned as Deputy Prime Minister, Housing Secretary and Deputy Leader of the Labour Party. It's not an error, it's a choice. This is what's annoying me here. They're like a bar of soap in the shower, slithering around. First of all, she was told she was given the wrong advice. Now she's saying that she made an error in not seeking advice, and yet she was told to go and get advice. I'm sorry, it's £40,000. It's not 400 quid, love. To me, this just isn't good enough. What do you think is now going to come to pass in the election for the new deputy leader of the Labour Party, Kate? Because there'll be a lot of jostling position. There'll be a number of people on those front benches with a cabinet reshuffle coming up as well, of people seeing this as an opportunity perhaps for them to get a more prominent position within the party. Looking ahead to the reshuffle and looking ahead to that deputy leadership contest, who do you think are going to be the heroes and who's going to be the zeros?
So, I mean, this could be a bun fight for the deputy leadership. So there's you have to get the backing of Labour MPs to go to the ballot. So anyone wanting to stand for this deputy leadership, because there's so many Labour MPs at the moment, you're going to have to get 80 supporters. So that's quite a chunk of people. But let's go through the runners and riders, as that's always quite fun. No, Mahmood. Now, she's the Justice Secretary, a tough talking Justice Secretary. She is having what you would call a moment. Everyone loves Shabana at the moment. Even in the Labour Party, they like her. In the press, she's got good write-ups. Despite having a really tricky brief, right? There's no prisons. We're letting prisoners out early. It's total crisis in our law and order system. Nonetheless, she's seen as someone that's willing to kind of grasp the nettle, take tough decisions and say it as it is. I think she's going to have to be one of the hot favourites. You could see her be challenged by maybe more of a lefty. So I'm wondering if like a Lucy Powell or a Louise Hay, who recently left the cabinet, could be running. You know, that thing of they're northern women, they're a bit to the left of the party, being a bit more of a challenge to Keir Starmer in a squad maybe. If there is a big competition, I think the interesting thing will be how much these candidates have to distance themselves potentially from Keir and some of the decisions he's made in order to win the membership vote, which is much to the left usually of this number 10 and of Keir Starmer. So, you know, are they going to have to throw some shade, throw a few rocks at their boss in order to get the job they want? I do think we'll probably see a woman in the job. One more thing I'd say is that you're going to see Keir Starmer's allies really want a coronation here. They're not going to want a protracted, bloody battle on the floor of Labour conference in a few weeks. They're going to want this to be quite neatly sewed up, show that they're moving on, that they're united, and they're going to be desperate for really just one person to be on that ballot paper.
Yeah, we want a protracted, bloody battle, though, don't we, Kate? I tell you what, if I was a betting woman, I wouldn't be surprised if someone like Andy Burnham suddenly saw this as a great opportunity because, you know, he's kind of squirreled away a little bit as a mayor of Manchester, doesn't get to pop up on our telly screens that often. People have always suggested that he ultimately has the eye on the prize of being the Labour leader and Prime Minister, and I wonder if he suddenly thinks, this is it, this is my moment, I better go for it.
Well, I'm sure Andy Burnham is busy trying to find a seat at the next election. He's obviously desperate to come back into Parliament. He needs a parliamentary seat to really be a proper big player at the head of the party. He's obviously currently mayor. He's been, you know, a few people there's been a few seats that people thought he might get. People that other Labour MPs might decide to retire early from, kindly step down and hand over to him. So far, that's not happened. But Andy Burnham, I'm sure, would have his eyes, maybe not on the deputy leadership, but certainly he's got his eyes on the leadership one day.
And what about Wes Streeting? He's an ambitious young man and he doesn't seem to get on the wrong side of many people, or am I wrong about that?
And Wes Streeting is a really popular guy, seen as super able, you know, potentially a future Labour leader. I don't think he'll run for deputy Labour leadership, and I think it would be actually a bit bananas for him to throw his hat into the ring. I just think that people are going to be looking for a slightly different politician in this role. There's going to be big pressure for it to be a woman. He's already riding so high, got such a big brief. Potentially he's going to be the next leader. I don't think he should be kind of dipping his hands in this potentially quite bloody battle. He would probably want to keep his powder dry and leave it to others.
Oh, I love a bit of political intrigue. I'm looking forward to the reshuffle and the peerages and all this stuff. I've missed it since the chaos of the Conservatives. It's great to see a political party in crisis as a journalist. Kate, it's great to have you on as well. I adore Kate Ferguson. Can I just say, she's one of my favourite human beings on this planet. She's just got so much energy. She's such a joy. A little firecracker of information and news. They don't make them like it anymore. There's only one Kate Ferguson, and she's ours. Right, we're going to be taking a short break now, but guess what we're going to be talking about after the break? Oh, that's right, the ongoing scandal of mopping up what seems to be a crisis right at the top of the Labour Party.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, well, well. Never Rayners, but it pours. She has gone, ladies and gentlemen. She is no longer Deputy Prime Minister. She is no longer Housing Minister. She's no longer Deputy Leader. And I would say some pretty soft words, really, in the report from Sir Magnus Laurie. Sir Laurie Magnus, sorry. I keep wanting to call him Sir Laurie Bagpuss for some reason. But he has basically said it's highly unfortunate that Ms Rayner failed to pay the correct rate of stamp duty on this purchase, particularly giving her status and responsibilities as the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government and as Deputy Prime Minister. She believed that she relied on the legal advice she had received, but unfortunately did not heed the caution contained within it, which acknowledged that it did not constitute expert tax advice and which suggested that expert advice be sought. Sir Laurie said it was deeply regrettable that the specific tax advice was not sought, adding, I believe Ms Rayner has acted with integrity. Really? How do you square that circle? I'm sorry, if someone says go and seek expert tax advice and you just choose not to, I don't consider that to be a sign of integrity, but there you are. And with a dedicated and exemplary commitment to public service. I consider, however, that her unfortunate failure to settle her stamp duty liability at the correct level, coupled with the fact that this was established only following intensive public scrutiny, weren't going to do that, were you, until we got onto it. Leads me to advise you that in relation to this matter, she cannot be considered to have met the highest possible standards of proper conduct as envisaged by the Code. Accordingly, it is with deep regret that I must advise you that in these circumstances, I consider the Code to have been breached, and so there remained no choice but to watch that head roll down the hill all the way to the bottom. And that is what has happened. Sir Keir Starmer has accepted Angela Rayner's resignation from all three positions she once held as Deputy Prime Minister, Housing Minister and Deputy Leader of the party, but did say in their little exchange of letters, you will remain a major figure in our party and will continue to fight for the causes you care so passionately about. Let's get a Labour perspective on this. I'm joined now by Sebastian Salek, who's a Labour councillor. Thank you for coming on, Sebastian. When you heard the news that she has gone, did you have a moment of thinking, good, that's the right thing, I'm relieved we can now move forward, or do you think this is a huge loss?
I think it's both, to be honest with you. It is a huge loss. Angela Rayner is an incredibly effective politician. She's spearheaded many of Labour's most popular bills, most popular policies. She's also very good at mediating within the party as well and making sure that that broad church can operate. But at the same time, it's also right that after the report was handed down and it found that she did breach the ministerial code, she was very quick to leave. And I think that is something that we're seeing from ministers when they resign in this government. It happens very quickly. There's no clinging on. And that feels like a real culture shift from what we've seen in the past.
Although you say that, there has now been a few too many, haven't there? Transport Secretary gone over funny business about a phone that was or wasn't nicked. Corruption Minister gone because her relationship with Bangladeshi politics, she's been accused of corruption. The Homeless Minister gone because she turfed people out of their house. The Deputy Prime Minister and Housing Minister gone because she apparently failed to pay £40,000 worth of duty on her house. It isn't looking very good, is it?
I don't think you could point to any government where there have not been resignations. The point is they're not clinging on for dear life after they've been found to do wrong.
Because there was no hope for them to cling on. If you're the corruption minister, you're accused of being corrupt. If you're the homeless minister, you've evicted people. If you're the housing minister and you've fiddled your stamp duty, you can't stay in office, can you?
You say that, Alex, but you look at people like Priti Patel, who was found to have breached the ministerial code over bullying civil servants. She clung on. She never went anywhere. And similarly, Dominic Raab, who was on holiday when Afghanistan was falling. He was Foreign Secretary at the time, also wasn't rushing back to London to help manage the situation. He also stuck around as Foreign Secretary. So it does feel like a culture shift where if you're found to have done something wrong, yes, that's regrettable, but these ministers are also resigning pretty quickly.
Some might say this feels like a very destabilising moment for the Labour Party. The latest polling has them on 19%. Things have been a bit difficult in phase one, to use Sir Keir Starmer's terms of his prime ministerialism. You know, it's kind of like kick someone while they're down, but perhaps there is opportunity in this. Perhaps actually in the wake now of Rayner going and a cabinet reshuffle and making a few peerages, this is an opportunity for the party to perhaps reset their agenda and reset their relationship with the public.
I think you're right. You mentioned the housing minister. Rushanara Ali hasn't been replaced, so there is still a vacant role there. We saw a little bit of moving around the other day, but there is still a larger reshuffle that's due, and it's a good time to put all of those puzzle pieces in place. You don't want to be left with empty positions or positions that soon will have to be filled. So yes, I mean, none of this is at all anything to celebrate, but the timing is largely fortunate in that you can have that wider reshuffle, get everything in place, and then take on the next parliamentary year.
There's going to be a deputy leadership election now in the Labour Party. It's been suggested to me they might want to sew this up as quickly as possible rather than have it overshadow conference. I was just going through the runners and riders with Kate Ferguson, the political editor of The Sun on Sunday. She thinks there's going to be potentially another female deputy leader. She named people like Shabana Mahmood as a possibility, Lucy Powell, perhaps the resurrection of Louise Hay, who knows. You will be, of course, entitled to a vote in that particular competition. Who would you like to see replace Angela Rayner? Who for you will capture the essence and spirit and future of the Labour Party?
Yeah, far too early to be thinking about specific names, but what I thought Rayner did really well was bring a bit of contrast. She's clearly a very different person to Keir Starmer, both in terms of background and to a certain extent her politics as well. And I thought that was really effective. I mean, there were times when that would have caused difficulties, I'm sure, but that kind of deputy leader contrast was really useful to have, and I'd like to see somebody potentially who can bring those opposing qualities or those contrasting qualities, particularly as Rayner was somebody who was just a normal person. She spoke to the everyday man or woman, and in politics that's not that common, so I'd like to see somebody who has that quality as well.
Thank you, Sebastian, for coming on and giving me your thoughts on this emerging news story. Sounds like Keir Starmer's cabinet reshuffle will be big, says Stephen Swinford, political editor of The Times. The only confirmation I've got so far is that Rachel Reeves will remain as Chancellor. Boo! Why? Why keep that one? You're going to shuffle anyone out, she'd be front of the queue, in my opinion. But there you go. Stephen Swinford, political editor of The Times, thinks that Sir Keir Starmer's cabinet reshuffle next week is going to be a big old thing. I can't wait. I love a bit of a cabinet reshuffle. And I'm lucky enough to be in position here all week. Julia, you've done it again. There's some cracking news and you're not here. I'll be covering Julia from 10 till 1 or next week, so I will keep you updated with the political to's and fro's of the Labour Party. Now, we had Sebastian there talking about how Angela Rayner was great at cutting through and speaking to the everyday man and woman, a term of praise often endowed upon Nigel Farage. So shall we hear what he has to say about Ange going?
Well, it was inevitable, wasn't it, really? You can't be housing secretary and avoid £40,000 worth of stamp duty. It's just as simple as that. So in the last few minutes, Angela Rayner was gone, but not just as housing secretary. Now, more significantly, she's gone as deputy leader of the Labour Party and deputy prime minister. That means there will be an internal election within the Labour Party, and you're going to see the hard left of Labour shouting very, very loudly. For the last few years, the story has been splits within the Conservative Party. Mark my words, within weeks, it'll be splits within the Labour Party.
Well, there you are. We mark your word. The split's already there, it seems. Shall we take a call now and speak to Paul, who is in Southampton? Hello there, Paul.
Hi, Alex. How are you doing?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm fine. Going on this Angela Rayner story, I think, how can you not read the room? If she's a working class person, anybody with any sorts will have just resigned. She makes up a load of stories. We all know it's not true. But I think she hasn't resigned enough. She should go back to her constituents and stand a by-election.
Look, this is exactly what I think. I'm trying to imagine. OK, I've never bought an 800 grand property. Couldn't afford to. Wonder if she's going to be able to make those mortgage repayments now she's not got the ministerial salary. But if I was doing such a grand purchase and having all the conveyancing and so on and so forth, we've just gone through this, actually, and And if you know, I said, well, do I have to pay a stamp duty on this? You know, and they said, do you know what? We don't know. Go and get some expert advice. And I thought that this is a question of 40k or not. I would be going to get that expert advice, and I'm not Deputy Prime Minister. To me, psychologically, there is either idiocy here, just boneheaded idiocy and arrogance to just go, oh, it doesn't matter, I'll do that another day, I'm a bit busy. Or there is a willful decision that goes, well, I don't really want to pay it, so I just might not ask, and then it's not my fault. And it's the motivation of this. I just don't know how something like that slips through the cracks. You know, the other day, I didn't think I'd paid my mortgage, and as a new homeowner, I was like, oh gosh, I hope I've paid my... I phoned up my mortgage company to say, have you taken the payment? Have you taken the payment? Turns out they had. I just, you know, as being a bimbo. But I was actually studying my bank statement to make sure I had paid it and phoned them up to ask them. So I don't know how the Deputy Prime Minister of this land, when said go and get expert legal advice over whether you owe £40,000 to HMRC, just doesn't do it.
I think it's the Westminster bubble of MPs' arrogance that they think they can do what they want, when they want, how they want, and they're not accountable. And I think things like this, because she's brought not only the job into disrepute, but she's, you know, it makes a joke of the party. I mean, I'm a Reform voter, and I think, you know, good riddance. But she should go back and stand in front of the constituents. I mean, she doesn't even live there anymore.
No, this is what I think. To me, I don't think enough is made of the fact that she's chosen to say she now lives somewhere that is hundreds of miles away from the people that she was elected to represent. Do you know, if anyone's listening in Ashton-under-Lyne, I'd love to hear from you. Yeah. I'd love to hear the last time Big Ange held a surgery there. I'd love to hear last time she cut some ribbons or spoke in a school assembly. Look, she is Deputy Prime Minister, and I fully understand that if you're a party leader, if you have a ministerial position, it's not the same as being a backbench MP when it comes to being able to be present in your constituency. I also understand that in this day and age, when people are looking for seats, and especially when you're a prominent politician and you are considered as much needed to deal with affairs of the state, you may not always necessarily stand in the constituency where you were born and bred, that perhaps before standing there, you may be living somewhere else. But you do go back, you do go to your constituency. You do care about their affairs. That is the whole blimmin' point. And I do wonder, you know, the optics of this, to me, buying that, why didn't she just wait a couple of years?
I mean, we don't particularly want her down on the South Coast anyway, but that's not the point. It just makes a mockery of everything about Westminster. They're in their own little world, and they get into that bubble and they think they're untouchable. You know, doesn't matter what colour they are. They're just not accountable to us anymore once they get in there.
I mean, look, it swings both ways. Some of them I do think they're untouchable. Jess Phillips springs to mind. But also, when you are holding public office, you are scrutinised beyond imagination. And you've got to expect that every single element of your private life, your tax affairs, how you voted, is going to be dug into. It comes with the position, and it comes with the privilege. And so there's still something about this story that just doesn't cut through or add up. Paul, thank you ever so much for your call. Let us now speak to our one and only Cardi P. Hello, Peter.
Hello, Alex.
All right, so come on. This is the sort of stuff we live for, isn't it? She's gone. Big cabinet reshuffle next week. What do you make of all of this? I found the sort of kindly words, to be honest, from Sir Laurie Magnus quite surprising, you know, sort of saying it's unfortunate and that it's a shame she didn't heed the caution contained that she should seek legal advice. I mean, I just don't know how. If someone says you better go and get expert advice on whether you owe all this money, that you somehow don't do that.
Well, it's exactly right, and so many in Westminster have been totally vindicated. It was a very, very different type of Angela Rayner we saw when she did that kind of mea culpa interview. Now she's gone. She's done the right thing, resigned as Deputy Prime Minister and Housing Secretary. How on earth you could be Housing Secretary when you haven't paid your stamp duty, and Deputy Leader of the Labour Party? That's a big headache for Keir Starmer. We'll maybe chat about in a second. But certainly, you know, there will be many with smiles of glee on their faces. Someone who was on her moral high horse on many, many occasions about numerous people, mainly in the Conservative Party, but other parties as well, who have done similar things. Well, Angela Rayner has gone now. Her political career, at least for the moment, is over. It's very interesting, actually, what Sir Laurie Magnan said, as you correctly say. Oh, it's all a bit unfortunate. Well, guess what? After those lawyers last night around 6 o'clock, I was on air actually when it came through with the different newspapers, including The Sun, reporting on the lawyers saying, well, hold on a second, we are conveyancers. What we do is we get people into homes and we make sure the law is right and the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed when someone buys a new house. It's not our job to tell you what your tax liabilities are. And they acted on the, I felt sorry for the head of the firm. It was a family firm, a small family firm. They did the right thing. They acted on the information they were given. Guess what? Angela Rayner didn't give them the right information. She didn't take proper advice. I mean, no conveyancer is a tax lawyer. They're two very, very different things. And because of her carelessness, and it's not her first offence in regard to homes, well, Angela Rayner had to go. And that's what happened. Ministerial report came out. Ethics advisor said, you've broken the ministerial code. Now she's gone. Big headache for Keir Starmer on a number of fronts.
Yeah, she's now got to stump up that 40k to pay tax, man, and figure out how she's going to pay the mortgage on that big old property of hers. Now she's no longer a minister.
When her salary is now halved because it's gone down from being Deputy Prime Minister to just being an MP. Yeah.
Never Rayners, but it pours, which may be how Sir Keir Starmer is currently feeling, because he's going to be having to live through the turmoil of a deputy leadership election, but is taking the opportunity to do a big old cabinet reshuffle. What do you expect from that?
Well, it'll be really interesting to see. We know Rachel Reeves is safe, but of course the question is there going to be a Deputy Prime Minister? Is that something that Keir Starmer actually wants? Who does he put in that role? Is it just a de facto thing, as it was for a long time under the Conservatives, where you just say, right, well, the next person in line, if Sir Keir Starmer should fall under a bus, is the first Secretary of State or whatever? It was Damien Green for a while under Theresa May, for example. So that's a question. Also, do you promote someone who's a rival? Someone like Wes Streeting, for example, the Health Secretary. Does he become Housing Secretary and Deputy Prime Minister? Where does that go? Who do you appoint Deputy Leader of the Labour Party? Because the rules of the Labour Party say that until the next conference, which actually is only a few weeks away, the Prime Minister, if they're in government, can appoint, the Cabinet can appoint a Deputy Leader of the Labour Party. Now, in reality, this is another massive headache for Keir Starmer, because no matter how he reshuffles his team, no matter who ends up as his deputy in name or a de facto deputy, well, there's going to have to be a contest at some stage, probably in the next year, to be Deputy Leader of the Labour Party. Now, you'll have all sorts of people standing for that, all sorts of people who don't like Keir Starmer. You're going to have maybe 4 or 5 people who will be making lots of criticisms of him, saying that things aren't going in the right direction from his own party. You'll have someone from the left of the party. You'll definitely have one of his welfare reform critics as well, those people who were the tail wagging the dog when he couldn't get his welfare reform changes through, even £5 billion of savings. So that's going to go on. That's going to be snapping at his heels. And then when that person, whoever that is, becomes deputy leader, if they're not in the cabinet already, there'll be a huge amount of pressure to say, well, they're deputy leader of the Labour Party, they've got to be in the cabinet, so another cabinet reshuffle or a job that can be given to that person who may well have been criticising Keir Starmer for months previously. So whilst he's got rid of one problem in Angela Rayner, there are many, many more problems that have just started for Keir Starmer. And if he's going to do a reshuffle, does he do it today? Does he do it over the next few days? He said on Monday Phase 2 was starting. I would imagine he's not enjoying Phase 2 very much.
Well, it seems like he's already been bumped into Phase 3, hasn't he? Cardi P, summer's definitely over and politics is back. What fun times we live in. Now, we understand that Nigel Farage's speech, which was due to take place at conference at 3 o'clock, has been moved forwards by 2 hours. He is going to be taking to the stage now at 1 p.m. and we here at Talk are going to be taking that speech live, so stay tuned, because Nigel Farage is going to be speaking live from Reform Conference at 1 p.m. I can also tell you, by the way, the Duchess of Kent has sadly passed away at the age of 92. She was rather lovely, actually, so I wanted to mention that. Duchess of Kent sadly has passed away. It's all going on today, isn't it? Right, we're going to take a short break, but because it's all kicking off, we're getting Jack Elsom to earn his cash money from that conference, political editor of The Sun. He is coming back after this break.
Tony Blair has been talking about digital ID for a long time. Yeah. Talks about it with vaccine passports, talks about it with national ID cards. In fact, every issue, the solution seems to be digital ID. What it's going to mean, can you imagine the people who are coming over in boats who are throwing their passports in the sea? Right. The idea that digital ID is going to be the solution is just preposterous.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back to the show, and let's bring back in Jack Elsom, political editor of The Sun, live from Reform Conference. Now, oh look, that's a surprise. I've just had a little sneak peek at what is going on at Reform Conference, and there's Andrea Jenkins in a spangly get-up, singing cabaret or something. It's not what you expect from a party conference. They're having too much fun.
Yeah, well, I think the Reform Conference are like no other. It's a big jamboree, pyrotechnics, singing, the rest of it. Everyone here seems to be having a good time, although I think it's in danger of becoming a bit of a sideshow to what's going on back in Westminster, although it hasn't. You'll be amazed to hear taking the smile off their faces. In fact, I think the grins here at Reform are getting even wider.
Well, yes, I mean, I think when Reform look at their political opponents, they don't consider it to be the Conservative Party. 98 seats up and down the country where they came second place, pretty much all of them to the Labour Party, and pretty much half of them by only a whisker, it seems. Nigel Farage has brought forward his speech to 1 p.m. Any indication of why that has happened?
Well, I think we're getting this government reshuffle, which is going to drag on into the evening, and so you'd expect the news channels. Obviously, they're going to lead with Angela Rayner's departure anyway, 1 o'clock news and the rest of it, but I think to really get full attention as much as you can, he wants to bring it forward so it doesn't clash with all of those ministers going through. And also, probably, he wants to react to it. He wants to punch the bruises of the Labour Party. It's clearly an incredibly embarrassing bad day for Keir Starmer. But also, you know, Angela Rayner, you speak to people very close to Nigel Farage, she was one of the ones which I think that he most, not feared, but thought that she could sort of match him in the authenticity factor. And I think that there's a lot of Labour people out there who actually in the cabinet who people feel are very inauthentic, a bit too polished, droids, whereas Angela Rayner, whatever you think of her politics, does come across sometimes quite normal. And so when you chat to people around Nigel Farage, she was the one actually, I think, who could have given him the hardest time if she became leader of the next election.
Nigel Farage will be on the main stage.
It's coming.
There you
Big
go.
man's about to come on
It's
stage for the sounds
coming.
of it.
It's like an airport announcement. There you go. So Nigel Farage is due to speak on stage at 1 o'clock, and we will be taking that speech live. Now, if I heard you right there, Jack, you were suggesting that the government... It's underway. Oh, my goodness, I'm going to need a whiskey after this. So the reshuffle has been brought forward, it seems. I'm surprised he didn't decide to take the weekend to sleep on it and have a little think. I suppose he might already know how he wants to move around the deck chairs on the sinking ship already, and so no time like the present.
Yeah, and I think this reshuffle has been planned for quite a while. The reason why it's today is twofold. One, because I think they probably hope that a fresh new team in Downing Street might distract from the woes of their Angela Rayner departure. It won't. But also the fact that there's clearly a lot of drift in the government at the moment, and a sense that a lot of the key personnel haven't been performing. And so if Angela Rayner, obviously Housing Secretary as well as Deputy Prime Minister, that is a hole that is going to need filling, and therefore it's the perfect excuse to do a wider shake-up of Keir Starmer's top team. So, who's going to be the people that move? Is Wes Streeting in line for a big promotion? Yvette Cooper been really, really struggling with the small boats crisis. Could she be moved and put someone in there who's a bit more of an attack dog? Someone like Wes Streeting, someone like Shabana Mahmood. So, big questions now. The only person who I understand that is guaranteed in her job is the Chancellor Rachel Reeves. Some viewers might find that a bit amiss, seeing as that she has taken so much of the political heat over that disastrous budget last year and is going to be finding it incredibly difficult at the next budget in November 26th. But she, we know, is safe, but the rest of them, they're not guaranteeing any jobs whatsoever, and from what I'm hearing, it's going to be a pretty sweeping reshuffle.
Wow, I mean, do you know what? I feel like I've lived through 3 weeks in 3 hours today. The political news has been coming left, right and centre, and we all love a reshuffle. I'm kind of sad I'm not going to be presenting for it, because I do enjoy the intrigue of it. But, perhaps actually, every cloud has a silver lining, and so perhaps Sir Keir Starmer sees the departure of Angela Rayner naturally opening up her particular position as an opportunity for want of a better phrase, a great reset. The big question, of course, and we've often spoken about when we look at the restructuring of the Conservative Party, we've looked at it through the prism of the two very different and competing wings of the Conservative Party, the sort of more true blue backbenchers, the Brexiteers, the sort of tough on immigration law, and then the more sort of wishy-washy centrists, the Cameroons, and who's going to get the soul of the party. Do you think that Sir Keir Starmer has this in mind as he goes into what he has called phase 2, and whether or not he's looking at the threat of reform, looking at his tanking polling and saying, whatever they're saying in the membership, I've got to pivot to the right?
It's unclear, really, because it's pretty much unclear what Keir Starmer really stands for. Is he a centrist? Is he someone on the left of the party? He obviously pitched to the membership when he won that leadership election that he was someone on the soft left. Is now